Chapter 401. This wasn't the first time Dake Dimming had activated the holy characteristic of the single scabbard in the Easter Duel Festival. For Tom Nixon, whose goal from the start was to be the final victor, it was naturally impossible for him not to have carefully observed Dake's competition. It was precisely because he had observed it that Tom Nixon was wary of it and immediately used the corpse decay curse of the corpse decay slime to weaken it. But from the looks of it, the corpse decay curse had clearly been broken, and the sword had also recovered to its peak state. The reason behind this might be discovered if one looked into it carefully, but Tom Nixon didn't have the time now. He only realized that there might be a special connection between the lion beast and the scabbard that could trigger a certain characteristic of the scabbard, and it was that characteristic that broke the corpse decay curse. In addition, the 5-star magic guide spirit, lion beast, holding the single scabbard, probably already had the power to resist his blood moon werewolf. However, he still had to try before he knew the truth. Remember, https://mvip can'tchu. VIP. If he really couldn't take care of it, then he could only use that move. Tom Nixon actually didn't notice that the blood moon werewolf had a trace of pain on its face when it was hit by the holy light. But even if he noticed it, he wouldn't change his actions. Blood moon werewolf charge. After receiving the order, the blood moon werewolf, in the middle of the arena, exerted force under its feet and instantly shot out. After seeing the blood moon werewolf's actions, the lion beast only swung the single scabbard down and sped up from the front. The blood moon werewolf had the evil soul wings to increase its speed and was extremely fast. Although the lion beast wasn't slow, it was still slightly inferior. Both sides suddenly collided in the red side's summoning area. The lion beast raised its sword and slashed with all its might. The blood moon werewolf suddenly flapped its wings and flew high, actually dodging this slash. Its 2 steel-like wolf claws grabbed the lion beast's head. Roar! At that moment, the lion beast roared angrily, and the holy light flowed from the single scabbard, sword to its body and suddenly exploded. The blood moon werewolf's wolf claws were illuminated by the light at an extremely close distance. Its hands were immediately boiling hot as if they were about to melt, and its blade-like nails became soft. As a result, its body stopped in midair. The lion beast didn't stop at all. It raised its sword and slashed at the bloody moon werewolf's chest. It werewolf instinctively used its wolf claws to slap the sword. Before the single scabbard could exert its strength, it used it to fly up into the air and hurriedly escaped. It fong asterisk s asterisk of the scabbard asterisk 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 s asterisk 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 the was it scarred asterisk scarred? It tit. T. Of its scabbard. It dimming asterisk s asterisk scabbard dimming asterisk 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 s asterisk 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 dimming asterisk t dimming. It DG dimming. What's going on? On the blue team's platform, Tom Nixon's pupils shrunk. He was in disbelief. He wasn't shocked by the lion beast's strength. Instead, he was shocked by the blood moon werewolf's retreat. Although the blood moon werewolf's transformation under sky full moon wouldn't be as irrational as when it used blood rage, it would still trigger its ferocious nature, causing its bloodthirsty instincts to erupt. When facing an enemy, it would definitely fight to the death. However, just now, the blood moon werewolf was really scared and retreated. Now it was flying in the air with obvious fear. Is it because of that sword? Or is there something wrong with the lion beast? Tom Nixon's eyes flickered. The moment he touched his card, he made a decision. Use demon parasite seed. The duel entered the 9th round. The blood moon werewolf pounced on the lion beast under Tom Nixon's command. Tom Nixon, who had realized that something was wrong, urgently summoned the lion beast. The draw of the 9th round made him even more anxious. Demon parasite seed? The moment Dake heard the name of this sure-kill skill, he suddenly had a bad feeling. He pressed his hand on the deck, and before he touched the card he immediately warned, "Lion beast, be careful." However, the blood moon werewolf had already pounced on it. The lion beast slightly raised its head and stared into the blood moon werewolf's blood-red eyes. The Blood Moon Werewolf's performance gave the lion beast the illusion that it also had intelligence. However, when the lion beast looked into the Blood Moon Werewolf's eyes, it could only see the innate madness and bloodthirst, and a little bit of fear. The lion beast thought for a moment. The single sword scabbard in its hand was like an extension of its arm, and it slashed at the Blood Moon Werewolf's wolf claw. The Blood Moon Werewolf suddenly reached out its left claw, and this time, it finally showed its bloodlust. It stared at the corrosive holy light and grabbed the single sword scabbard's blade. Then its right claw reached out like lightning and grabbed toward the lion beast's face. The lion beast's eyes focused, and its lips were tightly closed. Then, its right wrist that was holding the sword suddenly rotated, and the single sword scabbard's blade was twisted at an angle. Then, it exerted force and slashed the Blood Moon Werewolf's left claw in half. When the Blood Moon Werewolf's claw was one claw away from the lion beast's right arm was cut off from the elbow. Both sides attacked and defended very quickly. In the blink of an eye, the Blood Moon Werewolf's claws were cut off by the lion beast. The lion beast's expression was calm, and it continued to slash at the Blood Moon Werewolf's waist. A white light flashed, and the Blood Moon Werewolf's body was cut open from the waist down. The lion beast didn't stop at all. The Blood Moon Werewolf's basic stats were comparable to that of a 7-star magic elf, but it was killed by the lion beast's sword. But the lion beast suddenly felt a chill on the left side of its face, and it subconsciously raised its hand to grab it. However, it only managed to grab some blood. It spread its blood-stained left hand in front of its face and frowned. When did I get shot? That's one of the hero candidates, the lion beast? Eldest Prince Charles's expression gradually became serious. The lion beast had demonstrated the resonance between the hero and the holy sword, which finally convinced him that there was such a thing. Moreover, the aura that this magic elf displayed was indeed very similar to that of a hero. The only problem was its attribute. The lion beast was a combat type, and not a light type. This made the possibility of it becoming a true hero infinitely lower. Moreover, the eldest prince couldn't figure out how a magic elf could gradually make up for its bloodline through the holy sword, and become a true hero. In the end, why was it possible to refine a magic elf with the potential to become a hero? If the golden-haired youth wasn't the only son of the Valkyrie, he would have done everything in his power to find out the reason. But he was the son of the Valkyrie. If that was the case, the methods that he could use would be a lot fewer. On the other side, the eldest princess' way of thinking about this matter was actually quite similar to the eldest prince's. It was just that her style of doing things was different, so the methods she used were also different. But no matter if it was soft or forceful methods, because of the Valkyrie's existence, they couldn't be used. In her position, it was even more impossible for her to do anything. In comparison, eldest Prince Charles might be able to use some small, harmless methods. Elisha stared at the lion beast on the field, her thoughts constantly turning. At this moment, the two heirs of the royal family seemed to have forgotten that there was a legitimate hero candidate in the Shungmalian Academy. However, who was beside Elisha, was looking at the pool of blood on the lion beast's face with a nervous expression. Her many years of battle experience allowed her to sense the danger at a glance. She couldn't help but feel worried for her baby. The pool of blood on the lion beast's face was actually from the Blood Moon Werewolf's palm after its right claw was cut off. At that time, the lion beast didn't expect the Blood Moon Werewolf to have such a move. Even though Dake warned it, it still fell for it. Tom Nixon, who was on the blue team's platform, couldn't help but laugh coldly. It still fell for it. Once the Blood Moon Werewolf's parasitic demon seed was planted, it could drill into the target's body and cause it to lose control. If the Blood Moon Werewolf was still alive, it could even control it to a certain extent. Unfortunately, the Blood Moon Werewolf was still unable to withstand the lion beast's sword. Otherwise, but being able to successfully plant the parasitic demon seed was a victory. Tom Nixon's only worry was that the lion beast would once again activate the divine power of the sword and force the parasitic demon seed out. But from the looks of it, there didn't seem to be such a problem. After completing the summoning, he felt much more at ease. In the sky, the dark red sky quickly dissipated. After the Blood Moon Werewolf's death, the moon of sky's color faded, and the arena regained its light. But the embodiment of justice, the lion beast, had a problem. Its left eye was turning red at a speed visible to the naked eye. It was as if blood was seeping out from the bottom of its eye, dyeing the entire eye red. Around the corner of its eye, there were obvious veins popping out. Its face suddenly became ferocious. Clang! The scabbard suddenly let out a soft sound. But without the cooperation of the hero's mind, it couldn't activate the divine power in its weapon state. Lion beast? Dake noticed the lion beast's strange state and subconsciously called out softly. But the ferocious look on the lion beast's face became heavier and heavier. It suddenly let out a roar and pressed down hard on its left eye. It lost control of its body and knelt down on one knee. It could only use the scabbard to support itself on the ground, barely supporting itself. From the time the parasitic demon seed was planted to the moment it took effect, less than 10 seconds had passed. But the madness on its face was more serious than what Tom Nixon had expected. Roar. There was another roar. From the palm that covered its left eye, roots suddenly emerged and deeply penetrated the skin around its left eye. Then they crazily spread and crawled around its face. In the blink of an eye, its face was covered with dense roots. A bloody aura rose and wrapped around it. It's working. Tom Nixon, who suddenly saw this scene, couldn't help but exclaim. Dake glanced at him and quickly said, "Heidi Road Beast, help." Heidi Road Beast quickly moved forward. Before the battle between the lion beast and the Blood Moon werewolf, it couldn't intervene at all. However, the moment the Blood Moon werewolf was killed, its mind started to wander again. Meow. Heidi Road Beast walked to the lion beast's side and stretched out its cat paw to poke the lion beast's head. But the lion beast was obviously fighting against the parasitic demon seed's demonization and had no time to pay attention to it. Meow. Heidi Road Beast poked the lion beast's head again. Seeing that the lion beast still didn't respond, it raised its head, opened its arms to Dake, and shrugged. Dake's forehead wrinkled. He put the 2 magic cards of this round into his hand and forced himself to mentally prepare himself to temporarily give up on the lion beast. If it wasn't for the rule of the magic duel that he couldn't put his magic fairy back into the card during the duel, he would most likely choose to quickly put it back. Because the lion beast's state was clearly not right. He guessed that it was one of the Blood Moon werewolf's killing moves, but he didn't know the details. From the lion beast's current state, he could tell that it was a sure kill skill that could make the opponent go crazy, similar to Blood Rage, Berserk, and so on. And this guess triggered the lingering worry in his heart. After all, this lion beast was made from a special pride fruit. That pride fruit, that relied on the lion grass to cultivate, might very well contain the crazy genes of the lion grass. This might make the lion beast less resistant to this kind of ability that could make people go crazy. Otherwise, with the heart of justice, the lion beast should have a stronger resistance to this kind of ability than the average person. This kind of situation was very troublesome for Dake. He didn't have any means to dispel this kind of abnormal status. Even if he summoned the Diru beast or turned the scabbard into a spirit, the holy sword's holy characteristic would only have a better effect on dispelling the abnormal status. After all, the holy light wasn't a complete killing move. The other way to deal with it was to sacrifice the lion beast to summon a 5-star or higher magic fairy. Unfortunately, it couldn't be done, because the lion beast was already the highest magic fairy card in his hand. Let's end this quickly. Dake looked at the cards in his hand, and his eyes flashed. Diru Beast, Dream Demon. In the 9th round, he finally drew another hero, Diru Beast. The appearance of the Dream Demon also gave him more leeway in the next round. Even if the Diru Beast was targeted and restricted, he could also place his hopes on the Bliss 3, Moon in the next round. But there were only a few seconds left before the 9th round ended. Dake spent too much attention on the lion beast, so he didn't make the next move in time. On the other hand, Tom Nixon had already summoned a new magic elf on the blood platform. It was another magic fairy that was very similar to the rotten slime that appeared before. Scavenger Slime. Card name, Scavenger Slime. Type, fairy card. Level, *****. Race, undying. Attribute, ghost/poison magic. 1200 attack. 1600 defense. 800 Killing move, Ghoul Feign Death. The scavenger slime, that only had one difference in name, had the same level, race attribute and magic as the rotten slime. However, the attack and defense values were swapped. In addition to the same killing move Feign Death, the original Rotten Corpse curse had also become Ghoul. This rotten slime, that had the killing move Ghoul, could prey on the opponent's corpse to recover and strengthen itself. In a magic duel, it would absorb the magic remaining after the death of the magic fairy. Although this effect was not eye-catching, it could cut off all kinds of magic effects. Even Feign Death and zombification could not be used. It could be said that it was the absolute nemesis of that kind of magic card. But other than that, it was just like that. This rotten slime, as Ghoul, effect could absorb and transform the magic of the dead magic fairy X10. At the same time, its attack would increase by 10 stars, and there was an upper limit. At most, it could store the effect of 100 stars at the same time. That meant that it could increase its attack power by 1,000 points and magic by 1,000 points, and it had to absorb a lot of corpses. It could be said that the effect was very poor. Tom Nixon did not treat it as a core magic fairy, and the purpose of summoning it was only for the sacrifice. But as a 3-star magic fairy, the attributes of the rotten slime were actually very strong. After absorbing the magic remaining after the death of the Blood Moon werewolf, its attributes had also improved slightly. After that, Tom Nixon activated the next secret instrument card, Predator's Gift. Although this secret instrument card did not have a very powerful effect, its triggering condition was very ordinary, and it was very compatible with Tom Nixon's card set. In a sense, it was even a semi-core magic fairy card, because its triggering condition was to successfully hunt during a battle. The so-called hunting had a variety of forms, including blood-sucking, scavenging, magic-sucking. Any action of hunting and eating the prey was considered to have triggered the ritual and could produce an effect. The effect of Predator's Gift was to extract half of the prey and then transform it into a gift. That was the magic fairy called Gift. The star level was 1, the magic power was N, the attack was 0, the defense was 0, and the ultimate skill was no. The number of Gift was based on the star level of the prey. In fact, Tom Nixon had this Predator's Gift in his hands for a long time, but his magic fairy with the blood-sucking ability could not even kill a single prey, causing him to be unable to activate this secret instrument card. Even this rotten slime used the method of stealing chickens, using the action of capturing and eating from corpses to barely meet the conditions of the ritual. This kind of barely met condition also greatly reduced the effect of the secret instrument card. The ritual that could originally transform 6 gifts could only transform 3 in the end. 3 1-star gifts, 1 3-star rotten slime, and the materials for summoning a 6-star were all ready. And Tom Nixon had more than 1 6-star magic fairy card in his hands. He had chosen the Blood Moon werewolf in the previous sacrificial summoning, but it did not mean that he only had 1 6-star magic fairy card at that time. Therefore, to him, the duel was far from over. Under such circumstances, the 9th round passed in the blink of an eye. Tick. The 10th round began. Both sides drew their cards at the same time. Tom Nixon looked at the new 6-star magic fairy card in his hands and instantly changed his mind. And on the red team's platform, Dake also had 2 more cards in his hands. Fusion. Bliss 3 month. Because there was too much information to deal with in an instant. He was stunned for 2 seconds in a short period of time. Then he immediately issued a new order to the magic fairy below. Hidiru Beast, meow. Before Dake issued the order, the Hidiru Beast had already pulled out the single scabbard from the hands of the crazy lion beast. It looked up in confusion with a naive face. Dake's eyebrows twitched, and he issued another order. Big Milk can drink milk. Sun Ibu, attack with telekinesis. Then he quickly pulled out the Hidiru Beast and cast the sacrificial summoning spell. The puzzle of victory was in his hands, and now he just needed to do whatever he wanted. After hearing Dake's order, the Big Milk can immediately deactivated, round shape, and began to rub milk with its bare hands. It understood Dake's short order very clearly. Letting it use drink milk was equivalent to canceling the order to protect the magic fairy ball. This meant that its mission was complete, and the next step was to become a sacrifice. And before that, it could still contribute to the team. For example, the Hedera beast had used up a lot of its magic in the previous battle, and this bottle of milk that could restore half of its magic was crucial. Of course, it could also leave the milk for the next magic fairy to use. The big milk can's expression was gentle, and after receiving the order, Sun Ibu immediately began to move. The disappearance of the dark red sky canopy had strengthened its telekinesis, and its attack range had also greatly increased. Dake's purpose of letting it use its telekinesis was to let it interfere with Tom Nixon's summoning as much as possible. Both sides also needed to cast the sacrificial summoning spell. Dake was already a beat slower, and the casting speed of the sacrificial summoning spell wasn't as fast. If Sun Ibu could distract Tom Nixon's summoning, it wouldn't lose the initiative. Dake's idea was unquestionably correct. Unfortunately, he was still a beat slower. Tom Nixon was too decisive in this aspect. The scavenger slime used its body to wrap around the three gifts, making it impossible for Sun Ibu's telekinesis to attack. Thus, Sun Ibu could only attack the blue magic fairy ball. But Tom Nixon didn't care at all. Magic, blue 4521 3444. Only when the sacrificial summoning spell was completed did he suddenly point, controlling the blue magic fairy ball to avoid Sun Ibu's further pull. 3 in 1 6000. Chapter 402. At the same time, the scavenger slime and the three gifts on the field all turned into light and merged with the light from the magic card in Tom Nixon's hand, outlining an extremely complicated sacrificial summoning array. As one of the best among the third years, Tom Nixon's set of cards had a very complete system. If it wasn't for the fact that Dake Diming's magic fairy was too powerful, preventing him from triggering the gift of the predator, he could have quickly spread out two second-tier 6-star magic fairies on the field. However, a magic duel depended on how the duelist would react in an unknown situation. He did react and suppress Dake Diming in terms of high-end combat power, if it wasn't for that sword. From Tom Nixon's point of view, although each of Dake Diming's magic fairies were extremely special, the most difficult one to deal with was the sword that was both an equipment card and a magic fairy card. If it wasn't for Dake Diming's amazing opening and starting with the scabbard, he might have already gone up the stage to receive the prize. At least, that was what he thought. Regardless, the duel had indeed reached the 10th round. Fortunately, he had successfully summoned the strongest 6-star magic fairy in his hand. A 6-star magic fairy that was even stronger than the Blood Moon Demon Wolf. Website: https://m. VIP can't you? VIP come out. Mixed Blood Demoness. Card name: Mixed Blood Demoness. Type: Fairy card. Level: Race: Demihuman. Attribute: Fairy. Magic power: 3000. Attack: 2000. Defense: 2000. Ultimate skills: Eagle Magic, Cat Magic, Dragon Magic. The reason why that 6-star Magic Elven card, which didn't fit in with his deck, had been forced into the deck by him because it was really too powerful. Although the numbers on the surface were not exaggerated, and even compared to the powerful 6-star Magic Fairy, its attack and defense were lacking. However, the Mixed Blood Demoness has 3 ultimate skills made up for this. It was obviously not the first time Tom Nixon's Mixed Blood Demoness appeared, and the audience had a considerable degree of recognition of it. Following the appearance of this Mixed Blood Demoness, a wave of cheers sounded out, showing how popular this Mixed Blood Demoness was. The Mixed Blood Witch, who appeared on the blood platform, had a proud posture. She wore a black robe that clung to her body, and her face under the pointed hat was covered in thick paint. Her face couldn't be seen clearly. Eagle Magic. Hearing Tom Nixon shout, the Mixed Blood Witch suddenly opened her arms, and a large number of black feathers gushed out from her sleeves and spun around her body. The arms of the Mixed Blood Witch turned into wings amidst the fluttering feathers. Her face grew an eagle's beak, and when she flapped her wings and soared, she had already turned into a black eagle. This was the Hybrid Witch's Eagle Magic. After completing her transformation, the Mixed Blood Witch's magic attack and defense stats changed drastically. His mana increased from 3000 to 2000, His attack increased from 2,000 to 3,500, and his defense increased from 2,000 to 1,500. A total of 3,500 attack power. A value that only a 7-star magic elf could achieve. Kill him. Eagle Demonis. The mixed blood which swooped down. The telekinesis that Sun Ivan tried to block was broken in an instant. The mixed blood which flew at a low altitude and charged toward the red magic ball without any change in direction. The milk tank that was originally in charge of protecting the magic ball suddenly turned into light at this moment. It turned out that the Dake Diming's sacrificial summoning spell had been successfully completed. However, the timing clearly wasn't good enough. Fortunately, a black shadow flashed by, and the Heidi Road beast with the single scabbard suddenly appeared in the mixed blood witch's path. The mixed blood witch's sharp beak flashed as she charged forward without any fear. The Heidi Road beast slashed out from the front and collided with the mixed blood witch's sharp beak. The wind blew up the Heidi Road beast's feet. It wasn't able to withstand the mixed blood witch's attack, and the damage still hit its body, causing its mana to drop even more. However, as it was flying backward, a gentle force appeared behind it and caught it. The Heidi Road beast had a look of unwillingness on its face. It grabbed the milk that was brought over by the telekinesis and drank it all. As the milk entered its throat, a warm current flowed out and spread to its limbs. The Heidi Road beast recovered more than half of its mana. On the other side, the mixed blood witch missed after knocking the Heidi Road beast away. The red magic ball suddenly flew up under the control of Sun Ivan's telekinesis, and Dake successfully caught the magic ball. At the same time, the Heidi Road beast jumped out of the sacrificial summoning circle and reached out its hand towards the Heidi Road beast. The Heidi Road beast's expression froze, and it couldn't help but tighten its grip on the single scabbard. However, the single scabbard suddenly buzzed and started to struggle in its hand. The Heidi Road beast's face turned pale, and it threw the single scabbard away. Clang! The single scabbard vibrated happily. The Heidi Road beast didn't move at all, and the single scabbard automatically fell into its hand. The Heidi Road beast caught the parasitic demon seed and looked at the lion beast. It coldly snorted and activated the single scabbard's divine power. The white light shined on the lion beast's body, and its expression relaxed a bit, but the madness in its eyes was still there. The Heidi Road beast sighed and looked at the mixed blood witch. However, the mixed blood witch landed on the ground and turned into a mixed blood cat. Then, it abruptly opened its cat mouth and spat out a flaming magic array. From this magic circle, flames shot out. The Heidi Road beast held the sword in its hand and slashed down, splitting the flames in half. However, immediately after, flames shot out one after another. The Heidi Road beast raised its eyebrows and used its strength. The cat quickly ran and dodged the magic flames that were chasing after it. The mixed blood witch had turned into a black cat, and her 3 stats had returned to magic. It seemed that other than her stats, she had gained the ability to spit out magic flames. The power of the magic flames could only be considered average, but it didn't seem to have a cooldown. The Heidi Road beast quickly ran, and thought quickly. It endured the magic flames and closed in on the mixed blood cat. Then the mixed blood cat transformed again as it closed in. The mixed blood dragon transformed from a small black cat into a fat black dragon whose head was taller than the contestant's stage. The mixed blood dragon fiercely slammed down at the Heidi Road beast. Boom! The Heidi Road beast dodged the dragon's claw, and the mixed blood holy sword easily pierced through the mixed blood dragon's defense that was over 3,000 points. It triggered the mixed blood holy sword's mixed blood dragon ability. The mixed blood dragon used 3,000 points of magic, 3,500 points of attack, and 3,000 points of defense to obtain a body that was as tough as a mountain. However, this came at the cost of reducing its movement speed. Its movement speed became relatively slow, and it was extremely clumsy in front of the Heidi Road beast. Coupled with the mixed blood holy sword's mixed blood dragon ability, the mixed blood dragon instantly pierced through the thick dragon scales and into the relatively weak body. The mixed blood holy sword's body suddenly exploded and gave the mixed blood dragon an unexpected fatal blow. With the mixed blood holy sword and the mixed blood holy sword's mixed blood holy sword The Mixed Blood Dragon. S attack that was over 3,600 points actually insta-killed the Mixed Blood Dragon. Boom. When the Black Dragon fell, Tom Nixon was still calmly thinking about his strategy for the next round. No one would have thought that the Black Dragon with over 3,000 points of defense would be so weak in front of the Mixed Blood Holy Sword. The commentator and audience gasped in shock. In the ring-shaped audience, White Gouda recalled a familiar scene. When he was in the underground city, he used the Mixed Blood Holy Sword to summon the Mixed Blood Holy Sword, and it seemed to have triggered a similar ability. It ignored the opponent's defense and pierced through it. But this was the Mixed Blood Holy Sword. The weapon that was best at creating miracles. Impossible. As the Dragon Witch fell to the ground, Tom Nixon's voice was trembling. His eyes hurriedly scanned the cards in his hand, trying to find a magic card that could save the situation. But if there was such a card, he would have used it long ago. He couldn't understand the white cat standing beside the Black Dragon's body, and the Heidi Road beast that swung the Mixed Blood Holy Sword. Although he was confused, he still kept his sword as usual. In the red half area, Sun Ibu, who had become more and more dispirited after using too much telekinesis, took advantage of Tom Nixon's momentary daze to use his telekinesis, like flowing water, to wrap around the blue magic conducting ball and drag it downwards. Bang! The sound of the blue magic ball hitting the blood platform woke Tom up. He flicked his finger, and a huge amount of magic instantly burst out and pulled the magic ball. Magic! Sun Ibu called out softly and had to retract his telekinesis and wait for another opportunity. The Heidi Road beast, who didn't have the ability to attack, could only stand in front of the red magic ball and play the role of a goalkeeper. The 10th round was coming to an end. Dake Diming's summoning spell finally finished its cooldown. He reached out and touched fusion, but he didn't move it lightly. Instead, he moved his finger to the single scabbard magic card. The Heidi Road beast felt the sword tremble slightly and didn't hesitate to swing it out. This holy sword carried a huge amount of power and instantly penetrated the blood platform and shot toward the blue magic ball that was forcefully pulled by Tom Nixon. Curse of Thorns. Tom Nixon activated a magic card in his hand in a moment of desperation. This Curse of Thorns that he drew in the 10th round was originally used to protect the Mixed Blood Witch and reverse the situation. But the Mixed Blood Witch was gone too quickly. He didn't even have the mental preparation to use Curse of Thorns. When it was activated, a patch of green thorns appeared below the blue magic conducting ball, and a mysterious power was released from the thorns barrier. The moment the single scabbard pierced through the thorns barrier, it actually forcefully turned around under the effect of that power and shot back toward the bottom. The Heidi Road beast frowned slightly and instantly took a step back to avoid the single scabbard's path. When the single scabbard shot back in front of him, he slightly raised his hand and grabbed the rapidly falling sword hilt. Then he pressed down and changed the trajectory of the sword. As if he had a telepathic connection, he turned around and used the single scabbard to throw it out again. Along with the movement of his feet, the Heidi Road beast's sword movement was exceptionally beautiful. The holy sword flew out and carried an even stronger power. In an instant, it broke through the Curse of Thorns that was left in the air. This time, it hit the blue magic ball without any suspense. Bang! Tom Nixon managed to deflect the blue magic ball at the critical moment, but the holy sword still shattered the life enchantment that came into contact with it. Magic, blue 3444 1314. The life enchantment with only 1,314 points of magic value became extremely dim. Tom Nixon's face was pale. He suddenly injected magic power to make the blue magic ball quickly move away. But when he did this, he actually vaguely felt despair. The Heidi Road beast's god's sword. The Mixed Blood Witch's sudden death. It made him defenseless. Since even the final Curse of Thorns couldn't surprise the opponent, then this duel completely lost the possibility of a reversal. Although the countdown of the 10th round had already ended, if he couldn't even spare 3 seconds of summoning time, even if he pulled out the reversal card from the deck, what was the use? Tom Nixon glanced at the sword that soared into the sky. Then he saw that its form had changed. The single eye on the sword suddenly opened and transformed into the form of a magic fairy. While the curse of corpse decay suppressed the single scabbard, it also sucked its magic power. At this moment, although the single scabbard dispelled the curse of corpse decay, the remaining magic power was very limited. It was difficult to directly attack the magic fairy, but if it was just to chase after the magic ball, it was more than enough. And the remaining magic power of the blue magic ball was not enough to withstand even one sword. Tom Nixon couldn't stop chanting at all. On the red side's platform, Dake Dimming looked at his hand and suppressed the urge to draw legs on a snake. He didn't use fusion. Although the Heidi Road Beast could fuse with the Deary Road Beast to evolve into the Basti Beast, but at the same time, it would lose the resonance with the Holy Sword. Therefore, using fusion to evolve was actually a choice with both advantages and disadvantages. It needed to be cautious. As for the other cards in his hand, Dake took out 2 magic cards from his hand. One was the Flash spell, the other was the Wishful Die. The former could help the single scabbard to complete the final kill at the critical moment. The latter could be used to find fun. Dake had drawn the Wishful Die many times in the duels. It wasn't that he didn't want to find some fun, but when facing the strong third years, he didn't have much spare time. It was just that he didn't expect that in this final match, he would actually find some spare time. Tom Nixon didn't have any magic fairy on the field. As for his hand, although Dake couldn't see his hand, since he even used a magic card like the Thorn Curse, it was most likely that he had used all his cards. In fact, if the Deary Road Beast didn't deal with it properly, the Thorn Curse would be really troublesome. Dake's eyes flashed. In the end, he gave up the idea of finding fun in the competition. Single scabbard, and the match. Clang. Feeling the trust, the single scabbard fiercely shook the scabbard. It actually accelerated while flying, and in the blink of an eye, it caught up to the blue magic conducting ball under Tom Nixon's control. Tom Nixon's face was ashen. Dake Dimming suddenly took out the Wishful Die. The moment the blue magic conducting ball's life barrier completely shattered. When the magic power reached 0, the referee's whistle sounded to announce the winner. Dake successfully summoned the Wishful Die. Wishful die, as I wish, quickly show your spirit. A white die engraved with 18 different colored symbols appeared in front of Ivan of the Sun. Ivan stared blankly for a moment. Then he couldn't help but raise his paw and push the die. After all, it was a magic fairy that was equivalent to a magus. The Sun Ivan had successfully triggered the Wishful Die with a single push. Dake was immediately overjoyed. At the last moment, he suddenly had a flash of inspiration and came up with an idea. He couldn't help but try it out at the right time. Sun Ivan's Sure Kill skill, Magic Mirror, could nullify most transformation-type Sure Kill skills, and could even bounce them back. If he used it to trigger the Wishful Die, he wouldn't have to worry about the backlash from transformation-type Sure Kill skills. Thinking about it carefully, the Wishful Die was simply Sun Ivan's exclusive tool. Ding! When the dust settled and the audience erupted in cheers, the Wishful Die started to spin at high speed. The 18 attribute symbols lit up one after another. White and black light intertwined, and the 18 different colors of light spun and shone, creating a dreamlike beauty. The winner has been decided. Even though the duel was full of ups and downs, but Zach Wilson was about to announce the winner when his expression suddenly froze. He noticed the neon lights on the field. The audience's cheers slowly subsided. Countless people's gazes were focused on the Wishful Die that was still spinning in the field, and they all revealed looks of curiosity. Even Tom Nixon, who had an extremely ugly expression, couldn't help but look over. The Wishful Die suddenly stopped. Of the 18 attribute symbols, only one side was still lit up. It was still an ordinary attribute. Boom. Immediately after, the Wishful Die exploded into a cloud of smoke. Then a bunch of fireworks shot up into the sky from the smoke, exploding in the air and releasing rainbow-colored fireworks. Then a second bunch, a third bunch. All kinds of ribbons and fireworks shot up into the sky, illuminating the slightly darkened sky. The dazzling and colorful fireworks continued to bloom, and the atmosphere of celebration and joy was instantly filled. Dake was stunned for a moment before he suddenly realized what skill this was. He couldn't help but reveal a calm and elegant smile. Under the illumination of the fireworks, he slightly bowed to the audience, then suddenly opened his arms and celebrated, "Happy Easter!" F***ck. The untimely voice was drowned out by the roar of the audience. Chapter 403. Celebration. A unique skill of the atmosphere team. A celebration of happiness. It's an ornamental skill with no effect. The appearance of celebration was really unexpected. Whether it was for Dake himself or for the others, it was the same. But since it had already come to this, Dake could only put on an expression of, everything is under control, and show his identity as a member of the planning team. Under his lead, the atmosphere in the duel hall didn't change because of this unexpected incident. Even the audience seemed to be even more excited. Dake turned his head slightly and looked at the opposite side. On the blue side's platform, Tom Nixon's expression was ugly, but his expression wasn't good to begin with. Dake still didn't know why he wanted to provoke him before the duel even started, but that wasn't important. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to make him smile in this duel. Remember the URL, MVIP can't you? VIP, but the magic guide fairies in the arena seemed to be laughing very happily. Whether it was Sun Ivan who had triggered the wishful die, the Diru Beast and Black Diru Beast who were slowly walking back to the red side's summoning area, or the Lion Beast who was gradually breaking free from its madness, they all looked up at the fireworks in the sky and couldn't help but reveal a gentle smile. They couldn't feel the festive atmosphere, but they could clearly feel the joy of victory. Did they win the championship? In the first row of the audience, Valkyrie grabbed Princess Elisha's arm and couldn't help but ask. Of course, she knew that they had won the championship, but she wanted to hear it from someone else. They won the championship. They won the championship. Princess Elisha hurriedly replied. Her arm was already hurting, but her gaze was still fixed on the Diru Beast on the duel stage and couldn't move away. If the Lion Beast's appearance made her feel surprised, then the Diru Beast's appearance made her feel horrified. The Diru Beast, who was holding the single scabbard, was both a hero and a light elemental. Especially when she saw the Diru Beast instantly kill the Dragon Witch. She couldn't help but doubt. Could the successor of the Shungmalian Academy's hero really be more orthodox than the Diru Beast? On the other side, the first prince clearly felt the same way. His expression was not very good. At this time, he glanced at the blooming fireworks in the sky and suddenly stood up. He did not greet his confidant beside him, and just turned to walk out of the stadium. Since Dake Dimming had already won the championship, there should be no more matches for him. Since there was no match for him, there was no need to watch it. Charles only wanted to return to the mansion as soon as possible to discuss with the Archbishop at length. Meanwhile, in the Freedom Capital, in a private room of the dueling hall, the principal of Shungmalian Academy, Aerdii, kept smiling. From her point of view, the more people who had the potential to become Bravehearts, the better. The future was always the future of young people. On the other hand, City Lord Montier Folly slightly sighed. However, when she saw the golden-haired youth on the contestant stage giving his blessings to the audience, she became more and more indecisive. Aurora, who was beside her, raised her head slightly. Her eyes, which were as bright as the sun, reflected the bright fireworks. Thinking, and doing. Shungmalian open-air dueling hall. As the fireworks faded, someone leaned against the wall and couldn't help but sigh. In the end, she still couldn't take the opportunity to win. What a pity. Fortunately, she had bet on the two of them. If the bet still failed, then she could only do it herself. Although it was a bit difficult, it could still be done. The cheers of the first years were the most lasting. Before the dueling festival began, no one would have thought that the final winner of this group would be a first year. But now that the dust had settled, whether it was because the real powerhouses of the third years had not appeared or because it was too casual, the lower years had already decided the winner of the Easter dueling festival. Then, please let me read it one last time. Shungmalian Academy's first Easter dueling festival, the final winner of the first to third years is First Year Noble House, Dake Dimming. Following Zach Wilson's shout, the gradually quiet venue was once again filled with a sea of applause. Dake Dimming took the magic card in his hand amidst the applause. He showed it to the audience one by one, and the magic elves below the stage were stored into the card one by one. Then he only picked out the magic card of the lion beast and frowned slightly. The effect of the blood moon werewolf's parasitic magic seed on the lion beast had not been eliminated. Even if the lion beast immediately went into a dormant state after entering the card, the roots on its face were still there, and the muscles on its face would twitch from time to time. Maybe I should go look for Sister Kalien. Dake pondered for a moment, and only this magic card was stored in his sleeve. Then he walked down the stage. Next, please walk this way. The staff member guarding the side of the stairs pointed to the stage. Dake took a deep breath, turned around and walked forward. His footsteps unconsciously quickened. On the other side, Tom Nixon had also left the stage. It seemed like he did not want to meet Dake face to face, so he chose another path. He walked alone into the contestants' passage and went to a designated spot. He was very anxious. Not long after, Dake went up the stage again. The host, Judy, congratulated him as soon as he came up. However, it seemed like there was something wrong with his expression, so Judy immediately put away the pleasantries and went straight to the point. She smiled and said, "At this point in the duel festival, there shouldn't be anyone who doesn't know your name, right? Student Dake Dimong." Dake nodded slightly and his expression relaxed. "Senior Judy, didn't you specifically say my name again?" Judy put the microphone on her mouth and smiled. "Then can I call you Student Dake?" "Of course." Dake nodded. "What's your name, Senior?" Judy pursed her lips. "Student Dake, it seems like you're not as happy about winning the finals as I thought you were?" Dake immediately shook his head. "No, I'm very excited." Judy pretended to be surprised. "Is that so? Can I represent the audience? Representing your future fans to ask you a few questions?" Dake obviously wanted to say no, but after all, this was an interview for the final winner, so he had to give the school some face. He nodded. "Is it 3 questions?" Judy mischievously said. "It can't be like before." Dake. "Then hurry up. I think the audience will be looking forward to the finals for the seniors." Judy smiled. "Who knows which one they're looking forward to more?" "Then, Student Dake, what do you think of the duel itself?" Dake thought carefully and said, "In this duel, my performance wasn't very good. My lack of experience in duels, as well as the problem with the deck structure, made it difficult for me to fully grasp the situation." Judy's eyes flashed, a little surprised that Dake would actually give such a formal answer. She originally thought that Dake would just brush it off like last time. This made her immediately say, "Modesty is a virtue, but Student Dake doesn't have to be so modest. Your deck structure is very unique, and even in the entire school, it would be hard to find someone who could copy it. As for your lack of experience in duels, your performance in this duel was far beyond what a first-year student should be capable of." Dake shook his head. "You can't say that. I was just a little lucky when I drew the cards." After all, almost half of his cards were useless. As the core, there were only 3 Great Sins 3 cards. There were only 10 first-tier Magic Elven cards that could be summoned, and including the Scabbard, there were only 11 cards. Among them, there were 4 1-star Magic Elven cards that didn't have any life-saving abilities. Using this kind of deck was completely to fill up the number of 40 cards. It was already a miracle that in 10 consecutive rounds of card drawing, he didn't get stuck once. And in all 3 rounds he didn't get stuck. Under normal circumstances, even if he started with 5 useless cards, it was very likely that he would be killed in the first round. As expected, it was very necessary to believe in one's own deck. Thinking of this, Dake couldn't help but smile. Judy said, "Although luck is an indispensable factor in a magic duel, it is definitely not the decisive factor. Is it so hard to admit that you are strong?" Dake was stunned, and couldn't help but carefully size up this senior. Judy's face could only be described as exquisite, and the perfect makeup made her look very charming. Her temperament was between a kind of atmosphere and a kind of delicate, like a ragdoll cat that would suddenly reveal its mischievous side. He raised it a little, and said with a smile, "Since Senior says so, then I will admit that I am very strong." As soon as he said this, the audience immediately applauded. People would respect a humble person, but they would worship someone who was confident enough, who was flamboyant enough. If one didn't have a vigorous temperament, how could they be worshipped? The audience had a deeper impression of this first-year blonde youth from the aristocratic academy. Judy looked satisfied and then said, "Then let's start the second question. What do you think of your opponent in this duel?" As soon as this question was asked, Dake frowned slightly. If Judy's first question was considered a normal question, then the second question was somewhat inappropriate. Letting a champion who had just won the final round evaluate the runner-up who had been eliminated? How could you ask that? But when he turned his gaze, Judy secretly winked, and with her back to the audience, revealed a mischievous smile. In fact, the reason for asking this question, on one hand, was to ignite the atmosphere, and on the other hand, it was a little revenge for Dake's teasing in the previous interview. The wife of the famous duel master, Lucien of Switzerland, once said, "A woman's heart is made of needles." But Dake saw the meaning in her eyes, and instead of frowning, he smiled and said, "How do I say this? Actually, when I was in the preliminary round, I thought that my opponent in the finals would be Senior Winnie Scardy, but in fact the person standing opposite me was Senior Tom Nixon." Tom Nixon, who was walking in the contestants' tunnel, subconsciously stopped in his tracks. The sound on the stage passed through the wall and into his ears. But just as he was about to listen carefully, someone stepped out from the corner in front of him. Ms. Leah Gerda. Tom Nixon couldn't help but speak. But when Leah Gerda walked towards him, she raised her index finger and said softly, "Don't you want to hear his evaluation of you?" "I need a first-year student's evaluation?" Tom Nixon snorted, but his ears were pricked up. Dake Dimming held the microphone and said, "To be able to defeat Senior Winnie Scardy and successfully enter the finals, you naturally have your own uniqueness. Senior Tom Nixon's card deck is very connected. It gives people the feeling that no matter what kind of hand you draw, it can form a connection. This is something that my card deck is especially lacking. I should use this as a goal to study in the future. However, the flaws in Senior Tom Nixon's deck are also very obvious." "What flaw is it?" Judy asked subconsciously, but then she said, "If it's not convenient, we can jump over." "It's not something that's inconvenient to say," Dake said seriously. "It's very simple. His card deck isn't strong enough." Judy couldn't help but be surprised. "Not strong enough?" Dake said again. "Yes, it's just that it's not strong enough. If we have the chance to meet in the duel arena next time, I sincerely hope that Senior can refine a stronger trump card." Judy said in surprise, "But his Magic Guide sprite is already a 6-star, and it's a 6-star Magic Guide sprite that can reach 7-star attributes. This is already very outstanding among the third years." Dake shook his head and said, "Attributes are only one thing after all. The ultimate skill is the core of the Magic Guide sprite. Senior, do you have the next question?" Judy quickly said, "Of course." Dake nodded and said, "Please ask." Judy pretended to think and then asked, "What are your expectations for the final winner's reward? I mean, have you ever thought about what you could get from the last Easter egg?" Dake smiled and said, "Of course I have, and I'm looking forward to it." In the contestants' tunnel, Tom Nixon was a little surprised after hearing Dake's evaluation of him. He thought that Dake would mention his hunting gesture before the competition and his deliberate display of the Magic Guide card during the competition. But Dake didn't do that at all. Instead, he simply evaluated his card deck. However, he hesitated and said, "Is my card deck really not strong enough?" But in front of him, Leah Gerda shook her head and said, "No, he didn't tell the truth." Tom Nixon raised his head and asked, "Why do you say that?" Leah Gerda smiled and said, "Because you have a bigger flaw." Tom Nixon frowned for a moment, but then he took a deep breath and calmed himself down. In front of this woman, he had no right to be angry. Leah Gerda's voice sounded leisurely. "So, what do you think of my proposal?" Tom Nixon said, "But I failed." Leah Gerda smiled and said, "It doesn't matter, we can change the condition." Tom Nixon, "What condition?" Leah Gerda, "White Gouda, you should know. The development of everything had already transcended the trajectory. Everyone was going down a completely different path." After answering Judy's 3 questions, Dake Dimming bowed to the audience and left the stage. Next would be the final match of this year's Easter Duel Festival, the finals of the senior group. Dake was also looking forward to this exciting duel, but what he needed to do now was not find a seat to sit down and watch the battle. When he was on the contestant stage, he saw the professors in the ring. I remember that Professor Shi-Erfu should be sitting there. I wonder if Sister Ka-Lien gave herself a break? Dake walked along the back area of the ring, his eyes sweeping over each figure. Next, he still had to wait for the senior group finals to end before he could receive the prize with the final winner, so he could not leave the duel hall for the time being. The best way to eliminate the abnormal state of the lion beast as soon as possible was to find the professor. Even if Sister Ka-Lien was not here, Professor Shi-Erfu should have a way. Unknowingly, his relationship with Professor Shi-Erfu seemed to have improved. When Knight Baron Noah Sharp and the 6th-year student went up the stairs, Dake finally found Professor Shi-Erfu. Then he was very surprised to find that Professor Mitya Bartholomew was also beside Professor Shi-Erfu. Is it to prevent Professor Mitya from doing anything at Easter, so you specifically tied her to your side? Dake couldn't help but grin. He wanted to laugh. Professor Mitya Bartholomew was obviously an old leftover woman, but in front of Professor Shi-Erfu, she was like a naughty child who was caught red-handed. The dignified Silver Moon Witch, the Eye of the Stars diviner, had no dignity at all. He walked through the tunnel. Before he got close, Professor Shi-Erfu turned his head, obviously feeling the blessing of the wind spirit. Dake sometimes thought that in the eyes of Professor Shi-Erfu, the blessing of the wind spirit might be similar to a GPS signal. If one day he was really in trouble, Professor Shi-Erfu might be able to find him as soon as possible. Professor. Dake quickened his pace and walked to the front of Professor Shi-Erfu. There were many professors around, including Professor Ka Zayer and Professor Li Li, but Sister Ka-Lien was not there. Dake greeted the professors he was familiar with, then bent down and said a few words to Professor Shi-Erfu. Professor Shi-Erfu said with a serious expression, "Your magic guide elf is different from others. You really need to find Sister Ka-Lien to check it. But if it's just to eliminate the abnormal state left by the parasitic demon seed, I can do it for you." Dake thought for a moment and said, "Let's eliminate the abnormal state first. Then I'll visit Sister Ka-Lien." Professor Shi-Erfu nodded and said, "Summon the lion beast." More than 10,000 new posts were updated today. It's not too much to ask for votes, right? O equals Bomega, smiley face M. Chapter 404. Dake took out the lion beast magic card from his sleeve and injected magic power into it to wake it up. Then, he took out the ball sea lion and dream demon and used the sacrificial summoning spell to summon the lion beast from the magic card. The lion beast that appeared in front of everyone was tall and mighty, but its left eye was still parasitized by the magic seed, making it look ferocious. Professor Shi-Erfu glanced at it and took out a magic card from his card pack. He then waved his hand to summon it. Along with a soft sound, raindrops suddenly began to fall from the sky, emitting a fresh and refreshing aura. Bathed in the rain, the lion beast's expression clearly relaxed. It covered its left eye and panted slightly. The raindrops gradually slid down its cheeks and gathered in its left eye as if they were conscious. A flash of pain appeared. The magic seed in the lion beast's left eye withered at a speed visible to the naked eye. In the end, it turned into a pile of black powder and was washed away. The blood-red color in the lion beast's eye finally faded, and the crazy aura gradually dissipated. Dake heaved a sigh of relief and reached out his hand to the lion beast. "Remember in 1 second. https://mvip can't you? VIP." The lion beast raised its hand and pressed its paw into Dake's palm. Both of them looked at each other. The lion beast's eyes regained their clarity and seemed to be saying, "It's recovered. Don't worry." Dake was finally relieved. Then the lion beast's body turned into light and went back into the magic card. Dake touched the card carefully and put it back into the card pack. The professors couldn't help but smile when they saw how much he treasured the magic elf. The competition was imminent. Dake thanked Professor Shi-Erfu and quickly left. However, he didn't go far. Instead, he found an empty seat nearby and sat down to watch the final. The audience's enthusiasm seemed to be endless. When the Baron of the Night, Noah Sharp and the sixth-year student went up to the contestants' platform, the audience was still cheering. Both contestants were quite popular. The sixth-year student's name was Joseph Bruno, nicknamed the Blue Sky Knight. He specialized in flying magic elves. Almost all magic elves could fly in the air. In a magic engineering duel, a magic engineering fairy with the ability to fly would always have an additional advantage. In a duel with the Azure Sky Knight, Joseph Bruno, as long as he couldn't keep up with the rhythm, the magic conducting ball would fall into an endless barrage of attacks, and he would be killed in one wave. This was the general style of the Azure Sky Knights. In comparison, Evernight Baron was the all-round type. The duel between the two was undoubtedly exciting. They couldn't help but watch with rapt attention. The fifth and sixth-year contestants had basically grasped all the content that was normally taught in the academy, from the venue cards to the mystic instrument cards. They could use each of them with ease. Of course, from God's point of view, he could always find some flaws in the players. Optional hands were not emotionless robots. They had emotions and a sense of self. They would be affected by their physical and mental states. Even some obvious things could be completely overlooked in an intense battle. Some of the spectators liked to nitpick or criticize the duelist's performance on the spot based on the conclusion after the duel. That was truly irrational. Dake carefully observed the duel between the Evernight Baron and the Azure Sky Knight. Absorbing the strengths of both sides, he gained a lot. In the end, both contestants summoned their strongest magic engineering fairies. Evernight Baron's Redridge Black Dragon roared. Azure Sky Knight's Blue Demon Butterfly split into countless clones, covering the sky and earth. The final result was out of everyone's expectations. That popular Redridge Black Dragon had its bone marrow sucked dry by the Blue Demon Butterfly's clone and died on the spot. Azure Sky Knight, Joseph Bruno had obtained the final victory. The sixth year is the sixth year after all. Contestant Bruno once again gave us the most exciting duel before graduation. Let us give him the warmest applause. Amidst the thunderous applause, Dake pulled in his collar and stood up from his seat. Next, when the Azure Sky Knight's victory interview ended, it would be time to receive the award. After such a long time, he finally had the chance to enter the secret tunnel. He straightened his back and walked toward the contestant tunnel. Joseph Bruno, a sixth-year student of the Mage Institute. He had a head of long green hair, and his body was thin. His face looked feminine, and with his long hair he had a special aura. Since he was able to defeat Evernight Baron, Joseph Bruno naturally wasn't an ordinary student. When he was still in the third year, he had started to show his talent. When he was in the fourth year, he had been a leader. After resigning in the fifth year, he had been silent for a while. He had changed from a high-spirited duelist to a person who focused on research. It was said that he had applied to stay at the Mage Institute a while ago. His wish was to become a professor at the Shungmalian Institute. The position of a professor was actually very popular. Every year, many students from the Mage Institute wanted to stay at the Mage Institute. However, it was like thousands of soldiers and horses crossing a wooden bridge. No, it was even more difficult than that. At least one person could cross a wooden bridge. However, the applications from the Mage Institute were often rejected. Joseph Bruno quickly dealt with Judy's interview and pushed the process to the final award ceremony of the Duel Festival. At the invitation of the staff, Dark Diamond went on stage again. The two winners of the Easter Duel Festival appeared in front of the audience at the same time. This caused another round of excitement. Judy smiled at Dake and said, "I think the two contestants can't wait any longer. This year's Easter Duel Festival wasn't perfect because it was first held, but we still have an award ceremony. Now, let's invite the two duel professors to present the award to the winners of this competition." The applause was thunderous. The two duel professors went on stage amidst the applause. One of them was very tall, more than 2 meters tall, but his body proportions were very good. He looked like a bronze-colored short-haired beauty. The other one had white hair and a beard, but his back was straight and he looked very energetic. They were Professor Pawa Cheong-si and Professor Hans Fox. Dake met Professor Fox during the Duel Club's exam, so he was familiar with him. In the midst of the elegant music, The two professors each took a flat box covered with a red cloth from the hands of the staff. They then walked towards Dark and Joseph Bruno one after the other. Professor Cheong-si quickly walked in front of Dake. The gigantic human heart was about to press forward with an oppressive aura. Dark quickly calmed himself down. Good job. Professor Cheong-si bent down and rubbed Dake's head. Then she lifted the box in her hand and removed the red cloth. Inside the box, there was a medal and a small golden hammer quietly placed. Professor Jones took the medal engraved with the words, "Winner of the Easter Duel Festival," from the box and gently pressed it against Dark's chest, allowing it to stick to his chest smoothly. Then she picked up the small golden hammer and handed it over. Dake took the hammer and said softly, "Thank you." Professor Cheong-si rubbed his head again, turned around, and walked away. After Professor Fox gave the medal and golden hammer to Joseph Bruno, he walked over to Lu Zhou. Dake had a deep impression of this strict professor, but he didn't expect Professor Fox to turn around and smile at him. Although Dake was a little confused, he immediately responded, "Maybe this is a professor." After the two professors left the stage one after another, Senior Sister Judy said a few introductory words. Then, she very naturally pulled out a colorful brocade cloth from her side. Then, a rectangular table appeared in everyone's sight. On the top of the table there were two huge Easter eggs standing quietly. It's finally time for the most exciting part. Let's invite the two winners to present the final show. I heard that these two Easter eggs were specially made by our professors. In addition to the specific prizes, there are also all kinds of wonderful prizes, such as cute little pigs. Judy winked at the audience and said wittily, "Even the professors themselves don't know what kind of Easter eggs they'll open. It'll definitely bring a huge surprise to the two winners. Let's invite the two winners to open the prizes." Judy's explanation was very sudden. Dake couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. He had never heard of the Easter eggs having this kind of mechanism. If a pig was smashed out, wouldn't it be very inelegant? He inadvertently glanced at the sixth-year student next to him. It seemed like the sixth-year student next to him was also moved. So who was the one behind this? Professor Kazel was grinning from ear to ear in the audience. Dake looked around and noticed Ka Zaire sitting behind Professor Shierfu. His face suddenly darkened. What's wrong with Professor Ka Zaire? Did he get infected by Professor Li? Dake. Judy whispered. Dake had no choice but to pick up the small golden hammer and walk over. Judy said, "You can choose one of the two Easter eggs." After Dake heard this, he turned around and looked at Joseph Bruno. He said, "Bruno, do you want to choose first?" Joseph Bruno's mouth twitched. He pointed at the Easter egg and said, "I'll choose this one." Dake nodded and walked in front of the other Easter egg. Both of them stood in front of the Easter egg and picked up the small golden hammer at the same time. Judy said, "As we all know, the duel competition has some requirements for the players' card luck. Players with good card luck will always have a smoother path in the duel. Next, let's see who is the favorite of the Goddess of Luck, Dark Diamond and Joseph Bruno, respectively, the first and sixth-year contestants." Goddess of Luck? Dake listened to Judy's words and couldn't help but smile. He wanted to meet the Goddess of Luck, but he didn't know if she would do him the honor. While he was thinking, he suddenly heard the sound of an eggshell cracking. He couldn't help but turn around. It was the sixth-year senior, who had already struck the small golden hammer with all his might. Pa! The small golden hammer smashed onto the huge Easter egg, instantly activating a seven-colored light array. One after another, seven-colored light circles spread outwards, causing people who were not too interested in this program to be unable to help but look over. Joseph Bruno frowned slightly, and noticed that there were small cracks on the top of the Easter egg. Then the cracks quickly spread, and a strong light came out from the cracks. It was dazzling. Pa! With a crisp sound, the shell of the Easter egg shattered and fell to the ground. And the prize located in the Easter egg was finally exposed to everyone's vision. Dake was right next to him, so he naturally saw it the clearest. What appeared in the eggshell was a white door card and a blank magic card. It's only white? Dake thought for a moment. Door cards were divided into 5 levels: white, blue, purple, orange, and gold. The white door card couldn't bring people into the secret passage, and could only enter and exit the secret passage once a month. The blue door card could bring at most one person into the secret passage, and could only enter and exit twice a month, and so on and so forth. The gold door card was the highest level and could bring 4 people into the secret passage, and could only enter and exit 5 times a month. The number of people and the number of times they could enter the secret passage was to prevent too many people from entering, and also for the safety of the students. However, the final prize of the Easter Duel Festival was a white card which surprised Dake a little. He always felt that Professor Kazair shouldn't be so stingy. Is it because Bruno's luck is too bad? He couldn't help but think. Of course, Joseph Bruno didn't know that the door card had different levels. As a fixed prize, he knew in advance that the Easter egg would smash such a door card. In fact, he came to participate in the duel festival to get this door card. When the 2 cards in front of him were placed side by side, the difference between them could be identified at a glance. Bruno first put away the door card, and then reached for the other magic card. But as soon as he touched it, he suddenly felt a trace of magic fluctuation, and immediately retracted his fingers. However, the magic in his body had already been absorbed at that moment. That semi-finished magic card with a mechanism made beforehand was automatically smelted and triggered, emitting a strong, blazing white light. Then a round pink pig leaped out from the card. It really smashed a pig out. Just as the audience was exclaiming, a second, a third, and more pigs jumped out of the card one after another. 9 pigs jumped out in one breath, each with a different color. Joseph Bruno subconsciously wanted to summon the pigs, but in the end he showed a helpless smile and let the 9 pigs jump on him and lick him crazily. It's a festival, let's make everyone happy. Bruno thought so. But Dake Dimming beside him was sweating slightly. Low fever state. Chapter 405. I wonder what Dake Dimming will get. The audience looked at Joseph Bruno, who was pushed to the ground by the 9 little pigs, and couldn't help but look at the other winner on the stage. If such a gentle golden-haired young man was licked by the little pigs like Joseph Bruno, that scene. But he really wanted to take a look. People always liked to see immortals fall into the mortal world. Therefore, the audience held a strong sense of evil, and became more interested in the Dake Dimming's award ceremony. Student Dake, it's your turn, Judy reminded him. Dake had to pick up the little golden hammer again. In fact, he was also looking forward to the prize inside the Easter egg. Joseph Bruno's current appearance was quite embarrassing, but the magic card he got was not simple. From the intelligence of the 9 little pigs, it could be seen that they were not simple magic creations, but 9 real magic elves. The first website was https://m. But can't you? VIP. This type of magic elven card was similar to Angelia's Fairy Choir from the Sorcerer Academy. It was an army type of magic elven card and was very rare. If it could be combined with a special magic card, the Great Liberation, he could get 9 individual magic elves in an instant. Of course, compared to its practical value, its research value might be higher. A similar magic card was Deanna's Bear's Den. The ultimate skill of Bear's Den, 3 Little Bears, had a similar effect to the Great Liberation. It could turn the 3 little bears into independent individuals after the Bear's Den collapsed. If I can get a magic card of this type, maybe I can use it as a foundation and try to study the creation of weak fish. Dake calmed down and exerted his strength. Bang! The small golden hammer smashed hard on the top of the Easter egg. The magic attached to the little golden hammer was triggered and bloomed into a colorful magic circle that kept spreading outwards. Then, the huge Easter egg began to break from the top, and the strong light from the crack made Dake squint. When he opened his eyes again, only 1/3 of the eggshell was left. His gaze turned, and a trace of astonishment immediately appeared on his face. At the bottom of the eggshell, there were 3 cards. Could it be that even the number of prizes depends on luck? Dake couldn't help but glance at Joseph Bruno. It seemed that this senior's luck wasn't too good. With that in mind, Dake reached into the eggshell and took out the key card. Unlike the white card that Joseph Bruno had drawn, the card in Dake's hand was emitting a faint blue glow. It was a blue card of a higher level. This meant that not only could he bring an extra person into the secret passage, but he could also enter and exit it twice a month. Not bad. Dake was overjoyed. As long as it did not affect his studies, he would most likely choose to enter the secret passage on weekends. Since there were 4 weeks in a month, 2 chances were just right. Now it's time for the other 2 prizes. Dake looked at the 2 cards, and a trace of helplessness flashed across his face, but he still reached out his hand. The faces of the 2 magic cards were blank, and he didn't know what they were. Dake randomly picked one, and with 2 fingers, picked it into his hand. After that, he discovered that a trace of magic was indeed being sucked away. The magic card automatically began to smelt, and then automatically activated, and suddenly shot out a white light. Dake smiled helplessly, and didn't dodge, letting the white light from the magic card shine on his body. Then he suddenly felt his whole body lighten, and his whole body shot up into the sky. The sudden change startled Dake. Levitation spell, or flight spell? It didn't feel good to be in the air. Dake looked at the constantly rising field of vision, and he felt a little dizzy. Humans yearned for the sky, but when they were really high up in the sky, they would often feel fear. Although Dake wasn't afraid of heights, he still felt fear. He lowered his head slightly and looked down, and noticed that the audience in the auditorium was rapidly shrinking, and exclamations were constantly heard. The sound waves that filled his ears calmed him down. The first thing he did was to reach for the card bag, but he immediately realized that the spell card was in his hand. So he took the opportunity to inject magic, and soon received magic retroaction. It's the flight spell. The flight spell was also a type of universal spell, but compared to the 5 major spells in the appendix of the first-year textbooks, the flight spell was undoubtedly much more complicated. Dake understood in the process of learning the magic language that this was far from a spell that he could master at his own level. So, after he learned that this was a flight spell, he immediately turned from shock to joy. There was nothing to be afraid of. Even if he really couldn't handle it, the professors in the audience would come to his rescue. Moreover, the key to solving the dilemma was in his hand. Dake immediately took the flight spell in front of him, and tried to inject thoughts into the card along with magic to adjust the direction and speed. After a few sudden accelerations and turns, he suddenly found that controlling the flight spell was far less difficult than he imagined. He quickly mastered the essentials of controlling the flight spell, and he couldn't help but feel happy. Woo! Dake's sudden ascent really made Yvette, who was in the audience, so nervous that her heart was about to jump out. If she hadn't clearly seen Dake calm down at a speed visible to the naked eye, she would have fainted on the spot. Really, are you that scared? Claire glanced at her with an air of composure. Meow. The fat cat in her arms cried out with some resistance, and its meat hurt. The first princess, who was sandwiched in the middle, closed her mouth tightly. Other than the initial shock, the atmosphere in the duel hall was quite good. When the audience suddenly noticed that the blonde boy who was sent into the sky could fly freely, the previous exclamations turned into cheers. Dake flew 2 more laps in the air, and then slammed into the ground. Then he dived in midair in an L shape, floated down and returned to the stage. He was like a magician who had finished his performance, looking at the audience with a smile on his face. The applause was even louder. But this time, the award ceremony wasn't over. Dake put away the flight spell magic card, and reached out again for the last card. After the experience of the flight spell, not only was he not worried, but he was looking forward to it. I don't know what this card will be. As Judy said, this was really a test of luck. When Dake's fingers touched the 3rd card, he didn't feel the same as before. His magic wasn't sucked away. This made him frown slightly, and he subconsciously felt disappointed. But he immediately picked up the card in front of his eyes, and found that there were a few more words on the card. Transformation spell. It's the transformation spell. Dake's eyes suddenly lit up, and he was overjoyed. No wonder. If the flight spell was said to be between the 2nd and 3rd grade, then the transformation spell was a spell card that only the 5th and 6th grade students had the opportunity to learn. Moreover, the transformation spell wasn't a universal spell, and part of the spell had to be written by the magister himself. Therefore, it couldn't be used as a semi-finished card, and only absorb a little magic to activate automatic smelting. This also meant that Dake wouldn't activate it on the spot. Otherwise, he was really afraid that he would turn into a cat on the spot and carry one or two shameful titles such as Dake Cat. In short, this incomplete transformation spell should be a stepping stone to get a private lesson from a certain professor. Dake nodded with satisfaction and put away the transformation spell. Then he looked up at Judy and showed a meaningful smile. Judy, who was full of disappointment, quickly adjusted her expression and reached out her hand. It seems that the two contestants are very satisfied with their prizes. Here, as the host of this duel festival, I congratulate them once again. Congratulations to the 1st grade Dake Dimming of the Aristocratic Academy and the 6th grade Joseph Bruno of the Magic Academy for winning the first Easter Duel Festival. Duang. The sound of the piano suddenly changed, and the music in the arena instantly became passionate. Dake Dimming and Joseph Bruno left the stage one after another. After the two left the stage, the audience in the various branches also left the stage. It's over again. Yelvet looked depressed and reluctant to leave. However, after the duel festival ended, the connection between the branches and the main hall would be disconnected. No matter how reluctant she was, it wouldn't help. Claire walked over. Let's go, we have things to do next. That's true. Yelvet adjusted her expression and looked serious. What Dake showed in this duel festival wouldn't have a big impact on the kingdom's situation for the time being, but that was only because it wasn't time yet. If they didn't pay attention to it and let it continue to ferment, the future would be unpredictable. Just like she said before, some things couldn't be shaken off once they stuck to you. Elisha pulled back her two sisters who wanted to run away and couldn't help but sigh. Outside the branch library, the sky in the capital was still drizzling, and the rain continued to fall. When the first prince and first princess started to move, City Lord Mordilfully of the Freedom City finally made a decision. Aurora, prepare for the handover of internal affairs. Handover? Aurora hesitated for once. Isn't there still 5 months? City Lord Suna Mordilfully couldn't help but turn her head to look at the capital and faintly say, if you still insist on your idea, we have to prepare as soon as possible. Aurora was smart, so she naturally understood. She couldn't help but lower her head, her face slightly blushing as she softly said, okay. City Lord Mordilfully suddenly put on a serious face. Don't be happy too early. I'm not going to propose, I'm going to cancel the engagement. Aurora, huh? Dake Dimming didn't realize the far-reaching impact of this duel festival. In fact, even if he did, he probably wouldn't care too much, because that wasn't in his consideration. His goal was always clear. After leaving the stage, Dake summoned the little devil beast and released it from the curse cage. The little devil beast turned back into a familiar, and had the tracking ability of a familiar. With the help of the little devil beast, Dake quickly found Deanna and Luosi. Sure enough, Panduola was also with them. Dake, what card did you get in the end? Why didn't it trigger? Deanna ran over like a little bear, and Dake stopped in order to not bump into her. The crowd surged as Luosi and Panduola followed closely behind. Panduola looked at Dake and smiled. That's right, we were looking forward to you being pounced on by the little pig. Dake showed a helpless smile. I was lucky, the last card was Transformation Spell. Deanna couldn't help but blink after hearing this. Then why didn't it change? Panduola lowered her head and smiled. Transformation Spell records the transformation spell. It's not a common spell. Under normal circumstances, it needs to be written by the Magister himself to create a suitable spell card. Deanna subconsciously covered her head. Does it have to be written in the Magicite language? Panduola said softly. Yes, you have to start learning it from the 2nd year. The Magicite language is a knowledge that runs through the Magister's life. Don't be lazy when learning it, especially you, Deanna. Deanna couldn't help but stick out her tongue, pretending not to hear. Luosi chuckled. The 4 of them continued to move forward with the crowd, and soon left the open-air arena. The sun was setting in the west, the sunset was frivolous, everyone's face reflected a different kind of red. Today's Easter, it's surprisingly peaceful. Dake looked back at the open-air arena, which was like the Roman Colosseum, with a meaningful look in his eyes. When the crowd was almost exhausted, Joseph Bruno, who walked down the stage at the same time as Dake, came to the agreed place in the contestants' passage. Only Leah Gerda was waiting in the passage with only a faint light left. Although Leah Gerda had bet on 2 people, of course, she did it separately and didn't let them know about each other's existence. Tom Nixon's failure was within her expectations, although the process was a little different. She thought that Tom would be defeated by Winnie Scardy, but she didn't expect that he would encounter a Waterloo in front of Dake Dimmung. Fortunately, Joseph Bruno won the final victory as expected. "Hello, Ms. Gerda." Bruno walked in front of Leah Gerda, with a smile on his slightly feminine face. Leah Gerda raised her head, revealing the face that Dake saw in the antique bookstore, and smiled. "Congratulations on winning." Bruno directly took out the door card and said, "Don't worry, I was careful before touching it and didn't activate it." Leah smiled. "Thank you very much." Bruno picked up the door card and shook it. "You promised me that as long as I helped you win this door card, I would be guaranteed to stay in the academy. I hope to see the exact basis." Leah Gerda stared into his eyes and said, "I never lie." But in the next moment, Joseph Bruno suddenly felt dizzy and his vision became dim. When he came back to his senses, the door card in his hand had disappeared. Leah Gerda activated the door card and completed the binding. A key-like figure popped up on the card and bowed. "Identity verification successful. Identity verification successful. Hello, my master. Please register your name." Leah Gerda observed the figure and said with great interest, "Is this an intelligent system similar to the Tame Demon?" "It is indeed similar to the branch card. I don't know what other functions it has besides opening the door." "I heard that there is also a communication function." Joseph Bruno's voice obviously became low. His fingers had reached into the card bag, and his eyes were full of vigilance as he looked at Leah Gerda. Leah Gerda shook the door card at him and said softly, "Don't be nervous. I will do what I say. You will be the only one who succeeds in staying in the academy this year." Joseph Bruno asked, "Basis?" Leah Gerda shook her head and said, "No basis, you will know when the time comes. You should believe that your knowledge is enough to stay, otherwise, I can't help you even if I want to. By the way, don't do anything. You understand." Joseph Bruno's hand that reached into the card bag did not withdraw, but he did not move either. Leah Gerda was about to continue speaking when she suddenly raised her eyebrows. Then, beep! A nostalgic sound came from the door card in her hand. It was the same sound when the branch card received the notification. She looked at the card and a letter popped out. Chapter 406. Leah Gerda looked at the envelope logo that popped up on the card surface, and suddenly had an ominous premonition in her heart. But she hesitated for a moment and finally tapped her finger on it. With the infusion of magic power, the envelope opened and revealed the contents inside. "Ophelia Brad, come to my office." "Sarah Shi Erfu." Leah Gerda suddenly fell silent. She silently crossed out this notice, then turned the door card over and tapped it with her fingertips. A drop of bright red blood flowed out from her fingertips and meandered forward on the back of the door card as if it had a consciousness. In just a few seconds, an extremely complicated blood magic circle was automatically outlined. Then Leah Gerda tapped her fingers and actually began the refining process just like that. Remember the URL, MVIP can't you? VIP. The threads condensed from blood instantly surrounded the entire door card. This scene made Joseph Bruno's pupils shrink abruptly, and a trace of horror emerged in his heart. He could not help but feel lucky that he did not act rashly. But he was not completely inactive. "Are you still not leaving?" Suddenly Leah Gerda raised her head and said. Joseph Bruno instinctively swallowed and finally chose to believe in reason. He said in a low voice, "I believe you, but you must not forget your promise. Otherwise..." Leah Gerda was no longer looking at him. "Otherwise you will tell everything you know." "No problem. You can even go to your professor now." "Okay, bye-bye." With that said, she raised the door card and waved at him. At the back of the door card, there was already a bright red spider attached to it. The spider's 8 legs climbed to the edge of the front and emitted a faint red light. Joseph Bruno glanced at the door card again and quietly took half a step back. Then he suddenly turned around and left quickly. As the saying goes, the connoisseur looks at the artistry while the layman looks at the excitement. Leah Gerda's technique, in the eyes of an ordinary magister, was just a re-refining of a magic card. But Bruno recognized at a glance that it was a mysterious method of blood sacrifice. And the person who was proficient in this method, his face was slightly pale and he walked faster and faster. It was not until Joseph Bruno's figure had completely disappeared that Leah Gerda began to hesitate. Although she had used the blood spider seal to seal the communication function of the door card, she still could not escape the fact that Professor Shi-Erfu had discovered it. However, she could not figure out how Professor Shi-Erfu had found out that it was her. In theory, she shouldn't have exposed even the slightest trace of her true body. Did Midya betray me? Impossible. Leah Gerda. No. Ophelia Bullard rejected the idea almost immediately. Midya had no reason to betray her. But if it wasn't Midya, then who could it be? Ophelia took a step forward as she muttered to herself. In any case, this was not a place to stay for long. As for Professor Shi-Erfu's notice, she didn't think that I would go just because she sent me a notice, did she? Half an hour later, in Professor Shi-Erfu's office, Ophelia Bullard knocked on the door. The end of the Easter Duel Festival did not make the festive atmosphere disappear. After the students left the duel hall, they divided into two groups. One group went to Travelers Street, while the other went to the cafeteria. Although the cafeteria's dinner still came with Easter eggs, most of the students lost interest in the cafeteria's Easter eggs after getting the boiled eggs twice in a row. It just so happened that the competition had ended, so they might as well go to Travelers Street to enjoy the activities. Therefore, fewer students chose the cafeteria. Dake and his group chatted and laughed, but they still entered the cafeteria. The halfling chefs in the cafeteria found the blonde boy with the bat familiar in the queue. They could not help but lower their heads and talk to him for a while. When it was Dake's turn, the halfling auntie in charge of managing the Easter eggs winked at him, then took out an egg with red petals painted on it, and put it in the pile under his eyes. Looking at the halfling auntie's blatant cheating, Dake was stunned. The halfling auntie congratulated him. Congratulations on winning the championship. Dake suddenly understood. Then, without being pretentious, he directly reached out and took the Easter egg. Of course, the little demon beast did not forget to pick one. The cafeteria's menu tonight was very sumptuous. There were large plates of meat on the plates in the window. The rich aroma of meat filled the air, mixed with the aroma of desserts. When Dake was picking food, he also found a bottle of fruit wine. In this world, there was no rule that minors were not allowed to drink. But in order to protect the students, the fruit wine provided by the cafeteria had very low alcohol content. Dake casually picked a bottle and put it on the plate, then continued to look for food. In any case, he won the championship, so he was ready to reward himself well. So there was more and more meat on the plate. But when he turned around with his plate full of meat, he was shocked to find that among the three people behind him, two of them actually had small mountains of meat on their plates. He lowered his head and looked at his plate, then raised his head and looked at the plates in the hands of Deanna and Panduola. He could not help but sigh. People really couldn't be compared to each other. At noon, Deanna and Panduola still restrained themselves because they were not familiar with each other. But tonight they were completely open. Besides, as long as they used the excuse of celebrating Dake's championship, it would not be strange even if they took more meat. So on the dining table of the four people, a mountain of meat was quickly piled up. The little demon beast stood on the table and looked up at the mountain of meat with a confused expression. Beside it was Panduola's tamed demon, young winged dragon. It had a greedy look, and there was a sleepy chinchilla at the corner of its mouth. Then let's open the egg first. Dake moved the egg with red petals in front of his eyes. He could not wait. Okay, let's open the egg first. Panduola responded, but did not touch its egg. Instead, it just stared at Dake. Dake looked around and found that everyone was staring at him. Not only the three people at the same table, but also the students at the next table. Hey, don't hesitate, hurry up. A senior student from the Night Academy shouted impatiently. The rest of the people agreed. Dake could not help but laugh. It seems that everyone wants to know what this cheating egg will contain. Deanna held it in for a long time and finally could not help but say, "It must be a phoenix egg." Luosi whispered, "Didn't I tell you? There are no phoenix eggs." Dake persuaded, "You'll know when you break it open." Thus he pulled down and actually took out one of the prizes, the small golden hammer, and smashed it hard at the egg. Pa. Dake had opened many eggs over the course of the day, but the shell of this egg was undoubtedly the hardest. He hit it so hard, but only a small crack appeared. He frowned, put more strength into it, and hit it 2 more times. But after 2 more hits, only 2 more cracks appeared. "Inject magic," Panduola reminded. Dake injected magic into the small golden hammer, and hit it hard. It actually activated the magic circle on the hammer. A 7-colored halo instantly spread out, attracting even more attention. Immediately after, the goose egg-sized colored egg shattered. Dozens of eyes instantly focused on it. In the remaining 1/3 of the eggshell, a teardrop-shaped gem slowly rose, emitting a fiery red light. "What is this? A fire elemental gem?" As the discussion started, the gem suddenly burst into flames, and the surrounding temperature rose rapidly. "Paji." Panduola casually grabbed it and extinguished the gem's flames. She took the ruby in front of her, looked at it, and handed it to Dake. She smiled and said, "Unexpectedly good stuff, don't lose it." Dake took the gem, and without looking at it, stuffed it into his card bag. "Then let's eat." The incident of Dake dimming opening a gem from the egg in the cafeteria was just a small episode during dinner. As he quickly put away the gem, the people around him quickly skipped over it and started chatting. Panduola, Deanna, Luosi, and the little fiend monster all opened their own eggs after that. The little fiend monster actually opened another credit voucher. Although it was only a 30-point credit voucher, it was enough to make it happy. In this way, the little fiend monster collected another 200 credits. It happily shared the meat with the young pterosaur, who was also a familiar, and was in a very good mood. With the little fiend monster's influence, the atmosphere here became more and more pleasant. The mountain of meat on the table was decreasing at a speed visible to the naked eye. Deanna ate until her mouth was full of oil. Panduola was gentle, but her eating speed was not slow at all. Dake already knew about her appetite, so he was not surprised. When the meal was finished, it was already 8 o'clock in the evening, and the 4 left the cafeteria in satisfaction. It was a Sunday night, and it was rare to have free time. After the 4 left the cafeteria, they did not return to the dormitory, but slowly walked along the road of the castle, treating it as digestion after the meal. Unknowingly, they came to the Lover's Bridge between the castles. They held the railings of the bridge, felt the night wind blowing, and squinted to look at the night scenery. The surroundings were very quiet. Probably because most people went to the Traveler's Street, there was no one to disturb the Lover's Bridge tonight. The young boys and girls enjoyed the quiet atmosphere, as if there was a gap in the flow of time, engraving an unchanging picture. After a while, Dake was the first to speak. "Senior, the experiment you mentioned before." Panduola lifted her hair and said softly, "A small experiment. I will call you when I need you." Dake nodded and did not ask any more questions. Panduola said again, "The gem you opened in the cafeteria has a drop of fire attribute magic sealed in it. Is it really a phoenix?" Deanna's eyes lit up, and she was pleasantly surprised. Panduola said slowly, "Not necessarily, but since it is one of the rewards given to the winners by the Academy, that magic beast's level can't be low. Otherwise, just a drop of blood would not be able to emit such strong fire element waves. I suggest you ask the professor directly." Dake nodded. "Then I will ask Professor Kazair tomorrow." Panduola asked again, "You seem to have a good relationship with the professors?" Dake smiled, "Just so. Panduola said, "It is good to have a good relationship with the professors, but you can't rely on them too much. I think you can balance it well." Dake, "Of course." Panduola's eyes showed a trace of laziness, and then she took a deep breath, causing ripples in her heart. She said, "It's getting late, I should go. You guys should rest early too." Then she took 2 steps back, waved at the 3, and said with a smile, "Good night." Dake and the other two smiled and waved back, "Good night." "Hey." After Pandula left, Deanna became lively again. She said excitedly, "Where are we going next?" "Dake. Back to the dorm." Deanna. "Ew." Dake smiled. "I mean, we can sit in the common room." Luosi took Deanna's hand and smiled as they walked to the bridge. "Let's go." The three returned to the tower of the aristocrat house, and then sat in the common room for a while until Luosi showed obvious signs of tiredness, and then returned to the dorm. "See you tomorrow. See you tomorrow. See you tomorrow." Dake pushed open the door of room 201, a trace of tiredness in his eyes. Continuous high-intensity magic duels were actually very exhausting for the duelist, especially in terms of mental strength. After he entered the room, he first summoned Magician Secretary, and then handed over the important task of summoning the other magic spirits to it. He then threw himself onto the bed without caring about his image. Feeling the coldness of the blanket against his cheek, he only closed his eyes for a while, and then accidentally fell asleep. When he suddenly woke up, he subconsciously sat up, and saw that the hour hand on the wall clock had already turned to 11 o'clock. 11 o'clock. It's already 11 o'clock. Dake was suddenly startled, and then he subconsciously looked around. The magic spirits that were quietly working all turned to look at him. However, Dake's gaze swept across their faces, and he was still confused. It's true. Nothing happened at all. Then what did Professor Midyu mean by reminding me? Or did something really happen, and I just didn't notice it? Or... He sat there thinking for a while, and then he suddenly remembered that today was the first day of April. He mechanically picked up the magic brain dropper and extracted a drop of greed from his brain. After this duel festival, greed had indeed grown a lot. In short, the main goal for this month is to make greed 3. Everything else can be delayed. I still have 2 points of greed from last month, and with today's 5 points, it's 3. 5 points. I still need 5 more days to gather 10 points. That means I can start making it next weekend. After absorbing the greed, Dake injected it into the worm branch, and then he organized his harvest today, and placed the models of the little demon beast, the Diru beast, and the pure white dragon maiden on the bookshelf. As for the monster model, he temporarily put it in the drawer. After that, he washed up normally, returned to bed, and soon fell asleep again. Perhaps it was because of the fatigue from the duel, or perhaps it was because he didn't want to wake his master up. Tonight, the enchanted fairies didn't go into his bed. As for Dream Demon, Lion Beast, and Meow Meow, they were kept in the magic card as usual, and then placed on the small shelf on the table. Lion Beast sat cross-legged in the magic card, but it didn't sleep. It felt very guilty about almost being controlled by the parasitic demon seed in the duel today, and it attributed it to its lack of willpower. Even though it had a sure kill skill like Heart of Justice, it wasn't immune to this level of mental interference. It really didn't deserve the hero title. Unlike the Diru beast that didn't care about this, Lion Beast was actually quite concerned about the so-called hero's potential. It hoped that it could live up to its name and become a true hero who could protect everyone. But today's experience proved that it was still lacking. But after realizing its shortcomings, how could it make up for it? The Lion Beast was confused about this. Just as it was deep in thought, there was a familiar movement beside it. Dream Demon's magic card glowed. It didn't care at first. In the past, the Dream Demon would sneak out from the magic card almost every night. It was already used to it, until the light from the magic card became stronger and stronger. Chapter 407. The light was so strong that the entire dormitory was lit up in an instant. The magic elves who were sleeping soundly on their small beds were awakened at the same time. Their lively eyes instantly opened and turned their heads to look at the table. The movement in the bedroom woke Dake up in a daze. He forced his eyelids open and was dazzled by the bright light. What happened? After the initial confusion, Dark suddenly became alert and sat up half of his body. The source of the bright light was very obvious. As long as he adjusted to the light, he would be able to see the magic card on the table. Dream Demon. Dake's heart skipped a beat. He immediately lifted the blanket and got out of bed. The night was cold in early spring. Fortunately, his pajamas were thick enough. He stepped on his slippers and walked to the table in a few steps. He reached out to grab the Dream Demon magic card. Remember in 1 second. https://m. VIP can't you? VIP. The magic elves who reacted faster also got out of bed. The Diru beast reached out to grab his sword and jumped down. In a flash, he was already beside Dake. Afterward, the fairy Ibu and the little demon beast also came one after another. They looked at the glowing magic card cautiously. The magic wave emitted from the magic card gave people a very bad feeling. Dake's finger touched the magic card at this moment. Just that moment of contact, it was as if he was electrocuted. His finger jerked back. Hiss. What's going on? The Diru beast jumped on the table and asked hurriedly. Dake's eyes darkened, but he could only answer, I don't know. He really didn't know. The Dream Demon's change came without warning. He didn't get any useful information from the touch just now. The surface of the Dream Demon card was blazing white. He couldn't see anything. If it was the lion beast that changed, he would have a clue. Thinking of this, he suddenly noticed that the lion beast was anxiously looking inside the magic card. It wasn't dormant like, meow meow. It's okay. Dake comforted the lion beast. He slightly adjusted the angle of the shelf, so that it could see the Dream Demon magic card. Then he summoned the magician's secretary, and had it use the usual summoning spell to summon the lion beast. He took out the magic pen, and prepared to probe further. Me. Hurry up. BCBCZ. All the magic elves gathered around and looked at the Dream Demon's magic card worriedly. Their cries made Dake even more cautious. He only infused a trace of magic into the magic pen, and carefully approached the Dream Demon's magic card. When they touched again, the feeling of being electrocuted did not appear. This made Dake feel slightly more at ease. He manipulated the magic power to flow out of the pen tip, and made contact with the magic card. It was also at that moment that the magic power suddenly trembled. That slight but extremely high-frequency vibration flowed back along the shaft of the pen. Dake's eyes flashed. This time, he gripped the pen tightly and infused even more mana into it. Almost in an instant, that vibration was completely engulfed by the torrent of magic power. Dake succeeded in infusing the magic power into the Dream Demon's magic card. Then he immediately felt the magma-like heat and softness of the magic card. Demon me. The painful groan from the Dream Demon was fed back from the magic card. Dake's heart raced, but he forced himself to calm down and continued to use his magic power to explore. However, it was very difficult for magic power to feed back specific things. He searched in the magic card for a long time, and only felt that the environment in the card was in an extremely dangerous situation. It was like the inside of a volcano that was about to erupt. There was an indescribable pressure, and the Dream Demon living in it was like being trapped in the middle of a volcano. She was being roasted by the high temperature and thick smoke until she was weak and powerless, desperate and in pain. Dake wanted to continue to investigate the bottom of the volcano, when suddenly, a sharp pain was transmitted back along with the magic power. He instinctively let out a scream and took a step back. His whole body was covered in cold sweat. Me? Fairy Ibu anxiously wrapped around Dake's arm. The other magic elves were also nervous. They might be of great help to Dake in battle and in life. However, in this situation that involved magic and magic, there was nothing they could do. Tonight's inexplicable change made them more or less at a loss. Squeak. Ibu raised her head. Her little face scrunched up like a fried dough twist. Logically speaking, she should be the one with the most knowledge about magic among all the magic elves. However, there was nothing she could do now. This made her very uncomfortable. It's okay. Dake patted Ibu's ribbon tentacles and used it to soothe her. Then he thought for a moment and said in a low voice, The Dream Demon was affected by a special power, but I have no clue. That power made her feel pain and fear. It made a Dream Demon feel fear. Go find the professor. The little demon beast suddenly said. Find the professor if you can't solve a problem. The little demon beast was clearly very familiar with troubling others. Dake raised his head to look at the little demon beast. He couldn't help but think of Panduola's words about not relying on the professor too much. However, he didn't hesitate to throw this thought away and decisively said, "Let's go." Dake was very fast. After making his decision, he immediately put all the magic cards into his card bag. Before leaving, he also picked up Paradise. In a situation where there were no magic elves watching over the dorm, he wouldn't leave Paradise behind. After putting Paradise into his card bag, Dake took the magic pen and the Dream Demon magic card, quickly changed his shoes and left. The magic elves behind him also swarmed out. The polymorph turned into half-human form and hugged the trash slime. The magic guide secretary, floating in the air, had the lion beast magic card between the pages and was still summoning. The Diru beast and fairy Ibu stood on Dake's left and right side. The other magic elves also followed behind them. "Babie. Huhu anxiously called out. Dake waved his hand and put it back into the magic card. Then, this family majestically walked to the entrance of the corridor. But which professor should I go to? Or perhaps it would be better to find Sister Kalien? Dake pondered as he walked. He quickly went down the stairs and arrived at the common lounge. The magic lamp in the common lounge sensed someone's arrival and automatically lit up. He quickly passed through the lounge without stopping and came to the door. Then, he suddenly realized that it was already late at night. What time is it? Dake suddenly turned his head to look at the clock on the wall. The hour hand and the minute hand of the clock almost coincided. There wasn't much time left until 12 o'clock sharp. His expression suddenly changed, and he fiercely opened the door of the tower. Creak! As the door opened, the night wind whistled in. A few magic guide fairies quietly shivered. The feathered snake demon guarding the tower instantly opened its eyes and a faint light appeared. Dake felt the demon's gaze and raised the Dream Demon magic card slightly and said in a low voice, "Find the professor, it's urgent." The feathered snake demon's eyes flashed and slowly closed its eyes. Dake immediately breathed a sigh of relief and rushed out of the bridge. He knew that the feathered snake demon still wouldn't let him in after the curfew time, but it wasn't 12 o'clock yet, and he was only going out. There was room for discussion. He walked while observing the Dream Demon magic card. The light emitted by this magic card wasn't as strong as before, but the frequency of flickering had become very fast. It gave people a very urgent feeling, as if something was brewing. If he couldn't deal with it in time, the future would be irreversible. This made him feel more and more urgent. From the time he was awakened by the sudden appearance of the strong light, until now when he walked out of the tower, not much time had passed. He was almost doing whatever he thought of, and there was very little room for thinking. Sister Kalien, Professor Shi Erfu, Professor Lili, or Professor Kazair. At the most critical moment, Dake finally chose Professor Kazair. He sped up and rushed toward the dormitory where the professors lived. The cold wind whistled past him. The castle was terrifyingly quiet as it was close to 12 o'clock. If it weren't for the many magic elves following him, it would be creepy. Beep. Non-certified unit discovered. Non-certified unit discovered. Arrest. Arrest. The heavy cavalry demon statue that suddenly appeared in front of Dake made him frown. He was just about to order the Diru beast to end the battle quickly when a gust of wind suddenly swept past him. The lion beast that had just appeared from the summoning light rushed forward quickly. "Let me do it." The lion beast's steady and reliable voice resounded through the passage. Dark lowered his head abruptly and rushed through the gap between them. The heavy cavalry was instantly knocked down by the lion beast. Not long after, the lion beast returned to the formation again. Its magic power did not decrease by much. However, no matter whether it successfully defeated the heavy cavalry or just shook it off, Dake did not ask. There were no more obstacles on the road after that. When he was about to reach the teacher's dormitory, the Dream Demon magic card that he had been holding in his hand suddenly changed. The originally white light gradually burned into a scarlet color and began to gather toward the center. When he reacted, the light emitted from the Dream Demon magic card had already turned into a scarlet beam of light. It was as thick as a bowl and shot directly toward the wall. Dake instantly stopped. His gaze followed the beam of light to the wall of the castle hesitantly. Then he quickly moved the magic card, and found that the beam of light was always pointing in the same direction as it moved. Is this guiding me to a certain place? Dake's gaze sank and he injected magic power into his fingertips. The familiar electric shock quickly came, but he crushed it with force and once again probed his magical power into the Dream Demon's magic card. This time, the injection of magic power brought about a completely different feeling from before. There was no heat and pressure before the eruption of a volcano. Instead, it produced a kind of warmth and comfort, as if the body was in the soft touch of a mother's embrace. It made one unable to help but feel nostalgic and immersed in it. As for the Dream Demon in the magic card, it was like a baby curled up in swaddling clothes, sleeping soundly with its eyes closed. From the abyss of suffering, it became comfortable and stable in an instant. The change was so big that Dake began to doubt his own feelings. The scarlet beam of light was gradually fading, but if one were to sense it carefully, they could still feel the guidance of magic power. He looked at the direction the beam of light was pointing, and then glanced at the teacher's dormitory under the dark night sky. He suddenly realized that the main event of Easter was probably really here. But what was the main event? What did it have to do with the Dream Demon? Why did the Dream Demon magic card have such a change? Dake turned his head abruptly, and continued to rush toward the teacher's dormitory. No matter what it was, he could always get more clues after discussing it with the professors. He was not afraid of taking risks, and he was also very good at eating melons. If this matter did not affect the safety of the Dream Demon, he might follow the guidance of the beam of light and explore it alone. But there was no if. While thinking about this, Dake had already arrived in front of the teacher's dormitory. But when he was about to take the next step, his whole body suddenly froze. Because this step, no matter what, he could not take it. There was something invisible blocking in front of him, completely blocking the possibility of him wanting to continue moving forward. Dilu Beast. Roger. The moment the voice was transmitted, the Dilu Beast whispered softly and pulled out its sword from its sheath. The cold light was as cold as water. Its eyes focused, waving away the magic fairy beside it and instantly moving forward. Relying on the accumulated power of the step sprint, the sword with astonishing momentum fiercely slashed into the void above. Bang! A loud sound was heard. The air in front of him suddenly trembled. The invisible wall rippled. Dake's expression became serious. He found that the air wall in front of him, where the ripples radiated, formed an inwardly curved arc rather than saying that it was a wall in front of the teacher's dormitory. It was more like a spherical barrier covering the entire castle. And the dormitory building where the professors lived was just outside the barrier. The sword that the Dilu Beast slashed on the barrier did not leave any trace on it. Dake's heart quickly sank. What happened in this castle? Looking down from the top of the sky, the moonlight shone on the castle, and there was a slight distortion in a few places. Not only the teacher's dormitory, all the dormitory towers were separated by the invisible barrier. The only tower that was located within the barrier was the spiral clock tower in the center of the castle. The huge needle in the clock face turned clockwise. The grinding sound of gears became clearer in the extremely quiet night. At the top of the spiral clock tower, the witch who stopped the pumpkin carriage at the top of the tower, the guide of fate, the diviner of the eyes of stars, the witch of the silver moon, Midya Bartholomew, opened the curtain of the carriage and leaned half of her body out of the window, looking down at the entire castle with great interest. The silver moon was reflected in her eyes, shining brightly. Midya, are you going to start? Another person's voice came from the carriage. Midya Bartholomew slightly narrowed her eyes, enjoying the breeze, intoxicated in the throbbing night. Her voice was as charming and seductive as ever. Yes, the wheel of time and space has begun to turn. At night, I took Grandma to the hospital to see an emergency. When I came back, it was already very late. I finally finished writing. Chapter 408. The eyes of the stars shone brighter and brighter. A thumbnail map of the entire castle appeared in Midya's eyes, and a smile appeared on her face. For tonight, she was just a spectator, But that didn't stop her from putting herself in the shoes of the audience. In fact, most of the diviners had a habit of acting. It was easy for them to put themselves in the shoes of a certain person. Today is really a good day, Midya whispered to herself as her eyes swept across the room. The protagonist and the supporting roles, the good and the bad, the lights and the stage were all in place. Now it was time for the show to begin. Wait. Why is he here? Who? Midya's exclamation made the people in the carriage couldn't help but ask. Midya looked at the shining stars somewhere in the castle. After a long while she said, "Dark Diamond." The entire castle had been sealed. All the dormitory buildings were separated by a barrier. But one person stepped out of the dormitory tower before the curfew arrived. Was this the inevitable development of the story? Or was it the guidance of fate? After being surprised, Midya couldn't help but become more interested. In her excitement, she finally remembered her original purpose of accepting the invitation to become a professor. She wanted to observe this year's students closely and interpret a prophecy related to the stars, the black fog, and the abyss. And now, the son of the stars in her eyes had stepped onto the stage. Why do I feel like it will be an unexpected surprise? What unexpected surprise? I don't like unforeseen events. However, the voice in the carriage became stern. Midya smiled and said, "Don't worry, Sarah. Don't you want to see who is the most worth betting on?" Sarah Urfa whispered, "Midya, it seems that you are not suitable to be a professor." Midya spread out her hands and couldn't help but smile. "Isn't there no one more suitable than me? Why don't you find another one?" Professor Urfu ignored her. Why did Dake appear in the castle? Is he in trouble? Midya squinted for a while. The walls of the castle blocked her sight, but she didn't rely on the naked eye to see. After a while she said, "I saw pitch-black filth around him. There is no doubt that he is in trouble." Seeing that Professor Urfu was about to make a move, Midya reminded him, "The ceremony has already begun. Dake's appearance is already a variable. If you interfere again, I don't think I need to remind you of the consequences, right?" Professor Urfu fell silent. "Since you're the one who found me, I've already made arrangements according to your wishes. I hope you won't waste my time and effort. What we need to do now is wait. But I'm curious, how did Leah convince you?" Urfu raised his head to look at Midya, and a bright smile suddenly appeared on his face. "Why do you think she convinced me?" "In front of the teacher's dormitory." Boom. The storm sword, which was wrapped in air currents, slashed at the void once more, but even with the enhancement of sword dance, the slash could only cause ripples. Dake observed the ripples of the enchantment with a dignified look, and suddenly understood. The slash of the Diru beast slash was instantly dispersed throughout the enchantment. In the end, the force exerted by the slash became extremely weak and couldn't cause any damage to the enchantment. So that's how it is. Dake recalled the Diru beast and couldn't help but ponder. But this kind of enchantment, who in the world set it up? Moreover, it was in the secret passage, but who could set up this kind of enchantment in the castle? You really think the professors are eating? Could it be the professors who set it up? A sudden flash of inspiration caused Dark to be speechless. He took a closer look at the teacher's dormitory and suddenly had a kind of, the one who eats melons is the one who gets eaten. No, this is very wrong. Dake paced back and forth in place, and picked up the Dream Demon magic card again to examine it carefully. Perhaps it was because the Dream Demon's condition was indeed better, so he was gradually able to think calmly. The Dream Demon magic card was no longer emitting light, but there was a red flash on the surface of the card. Occasionally, there would be a mix of red and purple turbulence on the surface of the card, indicating a kind of instability. Dake couldn't help but frown. Could it be that I can only follow the guidance of the Dream Demon magic card and go to the place where the red beam of light is pointing? While he was thinking, he suddenly saw the ears of the Diru beast stand up, and the lion beast standing beside him said in a deep voice, "Someone is coming." Although Dake didn't hear the sound of footsteps, he didn't doubt the lion beast's words at all. He put the Dream Demon magic card into his sleeve and asked, "Which direction?" The lion beast stretched out his hand and pointed inside the castle. Dake nodded slightly, then picked up the magic pen and pointed at the magic fairies one by one. and all the magic fairies of the first tier were recalled back into the card. In the situation where he didn't open paradise, these magic fairies were constantly consuming his magic, so it was better to wait until he needed to summon them. As for the magic fairies of the second tier that took a longer time to summon, they were temporarily left outside. In this way, he only had the lion beast, the diru beast, the scabbard, the fairy Ibu, the milk jug, and the little devil beast that was still in the form of a familiar. Although there were still 6 of them, compared to the bloated team from before, it was a lot simpler. He glanced at the little devil beast and let it lead the way. Then he took the initiative to walk in the direction of the people. Those who could appear in the castle at this time were either participants or intruders. Since there was an intruder like him, the probability of meeting another one would be much lower. Therefore, he was more inclined to be a participant. Since he didn't know anything about tonight's matter, he needed to get the necessary information as soon as possible. Finding a participant and directly asking was obviously a good idea. When he returned to the castle, Dake quickly heard the clear sound of footsteps, which made him realize that the other party didn't have any intention of hiding. Who could it be? Dake's thoughts were quickly turning. The first person he thought of was Liagurda. As the most suspicious person at the moment, the existence of Liagurda was a mystery. Even if she was simply identified as the initiator of tonight's matter, there was a high probability of hitting the bullseye. But if it really was Liagurda, it was unlikely that she would walk over so calmly. Then is it Professor Mitya? It can't be White Gouda, right? In this kind of matter, the possibility of involving someone with the special identity of the hero's child was very high. Dake followed the normal logic to think. The sound of footsteps was getting closer and closer, and the two sides were quickly approaching. Before the answer was about to be revealed, Dake suddenly heard a trace of disharmony from the sound of footsteps. Then he suddenly thought of a suspect that he had almost overlooked because of his gradually decreasing presence. The hero of the spear, Ryan Hux. Good evening, Professor Hux. Seeing Ryan Hux appear from the corner, Dake showed a trace of an elegant smile and politely greeted him. Dake Dimming, it's you? Professor Ryan Hux couldn't help but frown after seeing Dake. Dake Dimming appeared in front of him. Although he was wearing pajamas, the few magic elves that followed him closely gave him an aura. Especially the tall and mighty lion beast. It was not to be underestimated. Compared to him, Ryan Hux was only supporting himself with a cane. He was wearing an ordinary professor's uniform, and was dressed very cleanly. The prosthetic eyes and limbs that were custom-made by Professor Kazair made him look no different from a normal person. Even though he was already old, the heroic spirit that was gradually recovering still made him look quite handsome. Originally, he didn't need the cane anymore, but he never let it go. It was the sound of this walking stick that exposed his identity. Dake was mentally prepared in advance, so he was more calm at this time. Professor Hux, my magic elves had some problems during the competition. They suddenly acted up before I went to sleep. I had to go find Professor Kaze. A trace of obvious pain flashed across the lion beast's face. At a place where Ryan Hux couldn't see, the Dilu beast fiercely pinched its thigh. Ryan Hux noticed the lion beast's expression. His gaze moved slightly and he said, I just heard a loud sound. What happened? Dake said helplessly. A barrier appeared outside the castle. I tried to break it but couldn't. Professor, do you know what's going on with that barrier? Ryan Hux suddenly frowned. Barrier? No wonder the surroundings suddenly became quiet. Bring me to take a look. Dake retreated slightly and let Professor Ryan Hux walk to his side. Then he started to return. You can touch the barrier at the door over there. Professor Hux, did you lose sleep tonight? Ryan Hux smiled at him. You don't have to test me. I entered the castle to follow a suspicious person. It seems that someone is going to be restless tonight. Dake's thoughts turned and he asked curiously, who is it? Ryan Hux shook his head and said, I don't know. I only saw her back. She ran very fast. If my right leg was still intact. Dake, can you describe her back? Ryan Hux, just a woman's back. If I had to find a characteristic, it would be her hair. It was as red as blood. Dake's eyes flashed slightly. The The clues in his mind started to piece together quickly. Leah Goethe, Ophelia Bullard, Olivia Copernicus, a woman with blood-red hair. Even though there was no conclusive evidence that they were the same person. But Dake had already instinctively linked them together. Of course, he wouldn't be so 100% sure. When they reached the door, Dake slowed down slightly. Professor Ryan Hux passed him and took 2 more steps forward. Then when he was about to hit the barrier, he very sensitively stopped. This barrier. Ryan Hux reached out his hand and pressed it on the barrier. After a few seconds, the place where his 5 fingers pressed suddenly rippled like water. The ripples became larger and larger, forming a huge circle. Dake's eyelids twitched. He had a better understanding of the hero of spears. Perhaps it was because Professor Ryan Hux's down-and-out image when he first arrived was too deep. Every time he habitually talked about his deeds, it always gave people a feeling of bragging. So much so that the students gradually ignored the fact that he was the hero of spears. But he was indeed the hero of spears. Phew. When Dake became more alert, Ryan Hux had already retracted his hand. He turned around and said, "I've seen this barrier before. It smells like an astrologer. For this type of barrier, sunrise and sunset are nodes. As day and night change, the barrier will change, and it will most likely be directly removed." Dake frowned slightly and said, "So as long as we wait until dawn we can go out." "That's right. In fact, whether I'm right or not, we can go out by dawn." Ryan Hux winked and pointed at the teacher's dormitory behind him. Dake rolled his eyes and said, "Then Professor, what should we do next? Wait here?" Ryan Hux said, "My suggestion is that you wait here while I go catch someone. By the way, do you know how many astrologers there are in the academy?" "I don't know," Dake said casually, "but I think this barrier related to astrology is most likely the work of Professor Mitya. Professor Hux, what do you think?" Ryan Hux picked up his cane and took 2 steps forward. "Very good. Your thoughts are exactly the same as mine. It seems that we have a lot in common." Dake asked casually, "Then Professor, can you tell me why you came to work at the academy?" Ryan Hux smiled. "Teaching and educating people. I'm lying. Of course it's because of the good treatment. Look at me now. I have arms and legs. Even my hair has grown out. When I was thick-skinned enough to volunteer, I'm afraid it was the best choice I've made in the past 10 years. Dake nodded seriously. Shungmalian Academy's treatment of teachers is really good. The teacher and student chatted back and forth, and the atmosphere was unusually warm. Dake didn't follow Ryan Hux's suggestion to stay here and wait for dawn. Ryan Hux also didn't mention it again. The 2 of them chatted as they walked, and in the blink of an eye, they returned to the interior of the castle. Dake intended to follow the direction of the Dream Demon magic card, but of course he couldn't tell Professor Ryan Hux in detail. Ryan Hux said he was going to catch someone, but he didn't reveal any information related to it. Even so, the 2 of them didn't stop their footsteps, and the direction they were moving in almost coincided with the direction of the Dream Demon magic card. In order to ensure the recovery rate of magic power, Dake also kept Fairy Ibu and Milkkin back into the magic card, leaving only the Lion Beast, the Diru Beast, the Scabbard, and the Little Demon Beast. After the 2 of them went up to the 3rd floor of the castle, they encountered a large number of patrolling golems. However, Ryan Hux waved his academy card at the golem and dispelled all of them. In this way, when the 2 of them stopped, they had already arrived in front of the statue of the Grand Magus that Dake was familiar with. Chapter 409. If we continue forward, we will reach one of the entrances to the secret passageway. Dake's heart skipped a beat as he realized that this time, the home ground was likely to be in the secret passageway. But since it's in the secret passageway, why would they surround the entire castle with enchantments? Is it to prevent interference? Or is there some other reason? Just as Dake was thinking about this, Ryan Hux suddenly stopped in his tracks and said, "There are footsteps." Although Dake did not hear anything, he immediately stopped in his tracks. After that, Ryan Hux glanced at him, reached into his pocket, took out a magic card, and winked at him. It was Dake's first time seeing Professor Hux use a magic card. He could not help but ask curiously, "Professor, are you a magus too?" Ryan Hux gestured for him to keep quiet, and silently chanted the summoning spell. Although he spent a little more time, he did succeed in activating the magic card in his hand. Then, a layer of light like a veil emerged, covering the two of them and the magic fairies. Dake felt the light and thin veil covering his body, and his eyes were filled with curiosity. He remembered the URL. "Invip can't you? VIP," but then, he did hear footsteps approaching quickly. He could not help but subconsciously move behind the statue. But Ryan Harris grabbed his arm and stopped him. In the next second, someone quickly passed through from another intersection, and suddenly appeared in their field of vision. Dake's eyelids twitched, and he immediately realized that the other party did not notice him at all. Is it a magic card with an invisibility effect? He suddenly realized, but then he thought of the invisible person from before and could not help but feel strange. But this was not the time to be thinking about the invisible person. After all, there were many people who had invisibility magic cards. Dake focused more on the newcomer. What made him feel extremely surprised was that this person was actually his opponent in the duel festival. Tom Nixon. How could it be him? Dark furrowed his brows, then suddenly focused, because he suddenly realized that there seemed to be someone approaching from behind Tom Nixon, or rather, following him. Tom Nixon didn't notice the existence of Dake and Ryan Hux at all. He ran past them quickly. Then, tonight's main character finally appeared. White Gouda, as well as his followers. Luoboat Broheim. Dake felt a sense of relief when he saw the two of them. It was as if something had returned to his grasp. In short, it was very warm. The corners of his mouth unconsciously curled up. White and Luoboat didn't notice them either, and soon ran past them. When the footsteps of the three people gradually weakened, Ryan Hux put away the magic card, revealing Dake and the magic elves. Ryan Hux said, "Look, what did we find?" Dake. "A cat and 2 mice." Ryan Hux couldn't help but laugh. "Why can't it be 3 rats? Let's go. Let's catch up and see." Saying so, he moved quickly, and Dake immediately followed. Ryan Hux deserved to be called a wartime hero. He was quite proficient in tracking, and he was always following behind White and Luoboat, so that they didn't notice him in the slightest. After a short while, the two of them arrived in front of a wall. "It's here." Ryan Hux touched the wall and confirmed. "They went in from here. There are many entrances to the secret passageway of the academy, and this should be one of them. But under normal circumstances, the entrance to the secret passageway should have already been sealed. How did they do it?" Dake was silent for a long time, and suddenly turned his head to look behind him. But there was only darkness behind him, and it was terrifyingly quiet. In the carriage at the top of the spiral clock tower, Midya Bartholomew almost subconsciously leaned back, and then said with a laugh, "What do we do, Sarah? You've been discovered." "Sarah," she Urfa said softly, "Salad." "Dimming, did you discover something?" Ryan Hux asked suspiciously. Dake turned his head and took a deep breath. "It's nothing. I think that the seal on the entrance to the secret passageway has been broken. The reason why the castle was covered with a barrier is to isolate the senses of the professors. Shall we continue?" Ryan Hux shook his head. "I don't know anything about this secret passageway, and I don't have the confidence to protect you. So I'll continue. You stay here." Dake was startled. He was about to say that he didn't need protection, but Ryan Hux suddenly raised his head and looked at him, his eyes full of warning. "You're still young, and you have a bright future ahead of you. Go back." After saying this, Ryan Hux's eyes softened and he added, "If you still want to get an A in this semester's history of magic." Dake couldn't help but be silent. "Professor, you don't have the morals of a teacher." Ryan Hux said casually, "After I left the battlefield, I understood a principle. One can't be too moral. Are you going back?" Dake could only say, "All right, Professor, I'll listen to you. Don't let me see you in there." Ryan Hux left a final warning, and slammed the wall. When the ripples appeared, he stepped through. Dake looked at the wall that had returned to normal. He tucked his sleeves into his sleeves and thought about it, and really did retreat from there. After he was some distance away, he pulled out the Dream Demon magic card, and gestured twice at the entrance to the secret passageway. He then put the card away, and said to the little fiend that had landed on his shoulder, "Little fiend, do you think this melon is sweet or salty?" The little fiend tilted its head, and said doubtfully, "Melons can be salty?" "Don't play dumb," the Diru beast said disdainfully. The little fiend immediately glared at it. "This is called innocence." Dake. O___O. After a moment of silence, Dake raised his hand, and picked out the wisp of green wind from his hair, and held it in front of his face. The blessing of the wind spirit, naturally wrapped around his index finger, like a naughty little fairy. Dake stared at the wisp of green wind for a while, and suddenly asked, "Professor, can you hear me?" Sarah Shi-Erfu originally didn't want to answer, but under Midya's mischievous gaze, she reluctantly said, "I can hear you." As the original owner of the wisp of blessing of the wind spirit, Professor Shi-Erfu had many ways to connect with it. But based on her cultivation, under normal circumstances, she wouldn't do that. Moreover, every time she connected, it would inevitably create magic fluctuations. Professor Shi-Erfu was very clear about this. If she wasn't worried about Dake's safety, she wouldn't do that at all. It was precisely because Dark had sensed that trace of mana fluctuation that he had suddenly asked this question. But Professor Shi-Erfu's answer was still a pleasant surprise. He immediately said, "Then can you tell me what you're doing?" "So, are you going to tell me or not?" Professor Midya's voice suddenly came from the wind. Dake didn't seem surprised at all. He said, "Professor Midya, can you not be like this? I'm really tired today." Midya blinked and moved closer to Shi-Erfu. She said, "Professor, I'm also tired." Dake. "Then let's get straight to the point, okay?" Professor Shi-Erfu's voice came again. "Dimming, are you in some kind of trouble?" Dake gestured to the magic elves and adjusted his posture. He leaned against the wall and said, "There's a problem with my magic elves, and I need help." Professor Shi-Erfu was confused. "Is it that lion beast?" "No," Dake said. "It's another dream demon." Professor Shi-Erfu. "That ghost elven? What's wrong with it?" Dake said, "It should be related to what you're doing. So can you tell me the details?" "Don't worry, I'm very good at keeping secrets." Inside the carriage in the spiral clock tower, Professor Shi-Erfu and Professor Midya looked at each other. Professor Midya nodded very seriously and said in a low voice, "They're all in the secret passage." Professor Shi-Erfu said, "It's not that I can't tell you." "That's good." Dake sighed in relief. Shi-Erfu said, "But you have to keep it a secret." Dake. "I swear on God." Shi-Erfu smiled. "I know you don't believe in God. Anyway, remember, you can't tell anyone, even if it's Yvette." Dake. "Professor, we can begin." Shi-Erfu. "Okay then. You should know about Ophelia Bullard." Dake raised his eyebrows and said, "Of course, we've discussed it many times with her as the center, haven't we?" Professor Shi-Erfu said, "You once met a person called Lia Gerda." Dake's interest was slightly piqued. "Professor, are you trying to tell me that Lia Gerda and Ophelia Bullard are the same person?" Professor Shi-Erfu said, "More than that. Olivia Copernicus is also the same person." Although it was unexpected, our previous conjecture was completely correct. "That's really good news," Dake said. "So, how did you confirm it, Professor?" Professor Shi-Erfu said quietly, "Bullard told me himself." Dake said in surprise, "Professor." Shi-Erfu's expression revealed a hint of slyness. "Yes, I caught her." Dake was really shocked this time. He had been involved in the professor's plan almost the whole time. At the beginning, in order to lure out the invisible man, he accidentally captured the vampire Vlad. Because of that, he overturned all the inferences related to the Scarlet Blood concubine. Now, to his surprise, he discovered that the completely overturned inferences were actually the truth. In particular, Professor Shi-Erfu had caught Lia Gerda, without a sound. How did she do it? What was the Scarlet Blood concubine's past? Dake couldn't hold back his curiosity. Shi-Erfu paused for a moment and said thoughtfully, "Ophelia Bullard's magic power is very special. I've added a small program to the 5 key cards as prizes to verify her identity. Once it detects magic waves similar to Ophelia Bullard's, the key card will automatically pop up a message. Dake. What message? Professor She-Urfa's lips curled. Come to my office to meet me. Dake asked in surprise. That's it. Professor She-Urfa nodded with a smile. That's it. Professor Mitya, who was next to her, could clearly see the pride on her face. But what made She-Urfa proud was not her strategy. She was proud that she had always believed in her student, and that the student had always believed in her. Although Ophelia Bullard said that she wouldn't go, her body still took her to Professor She-Urfa's office. During that time, Professor She-Urfa didn't do anything. It was the trust between the teacher and the student that built a bridge between the two. After hearing this, Dake couldn't help but have a strange look on his face. He never thought that things would develop so simply. Now that the identity of Leah Gerda had been confirmed, many things could be deduced. How could a person who tried so hard to sneak into the academy turn herself in just because of a sentence? But speaking of turning herself in, the Scarlet Blood concubine seemed to have a criminal record? Could it be narcissism? God, how could there be such a thing? But the development of the truth was so unpredictable. Just like how reality was never reasonable, people who always thought according to reasonable logic would often be defeated by illogical reality. Not only did Ophelia Bullard turn herself in front of Professor She-Urfa, but she also told him all about her plan. I asked her many times but she didn't tell me at all, Professor Mitya said sourly. But no one cared about this little bit of heartbreak. Professor She-Urfa even glared at her. I haven't held you responsible for sneaking into the academy. Professor Mitya immediately pretended to be shy and said, but I can't refuse the request of my savior. Dake suddenly shuddered, and goosebumps appeared all over his body. Professor She-Urfa obviously didn't feel good either, and he quickly continued to explain. Mitya Bartholomew had once gone to the battlefield. The reason was to find a marriage. Of course, this was a more artistic way of saying it. In the end, it was because she was tired of being alone in her mother's womb, so she went to the battlefield to relieve her boredom and see if there were any pleasing male idols. With the identity of a prophet of the Star Tower as a guarantee, she was basically a guest of honor wherever she went. Originally, her safety should have been guaranteed, but she had a restless personality and accidentally put herself in danger. At that time, the person who saved her was the Blood Maiden, Ophelia Bullard. Don't talk about why prophets were in danger. If prophets were really such a useful profession, then everyone would want to become one. But in reality, prophets were a profession that many people avoided. In order to save her life, Mitya accepted Ophelia Bullard's request and brought her into the Shungmalian Academy. Of course, at that time, Ophelia Bullard had a very good reason. Ophelia Bullard's original purpose of sneaking into the academy was to see her child, at least on the surface. When She-Urfa said this, a complicated look flashed through his eyes. Dake said in surprise, she has a child? Yes. Professor She-Urfa sighed deeply. I never thought that White Gouda would be her child. Mitya added, no one would have thought of it. Professor She-Urfa continued, I don't know if it's because Brett Gouda's bloodline power is too strong or if he did something special, but even now, I can't see any traces of the Blood clan's bloodline on White. Before, I always thought that White's mother was the daughter of a small noble. She fell in love with Brett because he saved her, and she died in the war. And Ophelia Bullard had been missing for a long time before White was born. Of course, now we know that she was saved by Brett during the vampire's attack. When Dake heard this, he had a plan in his mind. In other words, the disappearance of the Blood Maiden was fake. In reality, after she was captured by the vampire, she was saved by the hero. However, the hero concealed this matter and married her. Let me guess. The reason the hero hid this matter was to protect the Blood Maiden, and the Blood Maiden needed protection because she was embraced by the vampire? Speaking of this, Dake's heart suddenly skipped a beat, and he said in surprise and bewilderment, don't tell me that the vampire who bit her was Vlad. For some reason, the atmosphere in the room suddenly became silent. After a long while, Professor She-Urfa said, your imagination is really rich. Dake touched his nose and said awkwardly, it's just SOSO. But Professor Shi-Erfu immediately said, "To a certain extent you're right." Deka? Professor Shi-Erfu continued. "The wrong part is that the vampire Vlad is just a vessel for him." Dake, who is he? Shi-Erfu, the Devil King. Dake. Oh. Shi-Erfu, you're not surprised? Dake. I'm very surprised. Midya. Pft. Shi-Erfu said helplessly. That's how it is. This isn't information that I should reveal to a first-year student. But since it's you, I don't need to hide it. After Ophelia Blood was captured by the vampires, she was sent directly to the Demon King's side. The Devil King bit her neck and performed the embrace on her, turning the last of the Blood clan into a blood thrall. After that, the hero Brett God arrived and saved Blood from the Devil King, and successfully escaped. But it was too late. Going from a blood thrall to a blood demon, and then to a vampire was a necessary advancement process for non-hereditary vampires. After being embraced by a vampire, one would become a blood thrall, and be controlled by the vampire. Blood thralls were bloodthirsty, cruel, and irrational, and were the most lowly monsters. Only after becoming a blood demon could they control their desire to drink blood, and gradually regain their rationality. If Ophelia Blood had really been turned into a blood thrall by the Devil King, then the hero had found a reason to hide this information. No matter what Ophelia Blood's identity was before she was embraced, it was impossible for her to appear in human society again. The reason why Ophelia Blood was wanted by the Holy Church at the end of the war was easy to connect. It was probably because the hero who protected her had sacrificed himself. From the Holy Church's point of view, they probably didn't know that Ophelia Bullard and hero Brett God were actually husband and wife. Otherwise, they would have added a child's name to their wanted list. In order to cut off the Holy Church's pursuit, Ophelia Blood chose to turn herself in. With her identity as a war hero and her ability to resist the corrosion of the vampire's bloodline as a member of the Blood Clan, she was forgiven. She was only locked up in Badia prison and not executed. If it had been an ordinary vampire who performed the embrace on her, and not the Devil King, she wouldn't have ended up like this. Fortunately, her identity as a war hero did play a role, and she was treated quite well in Badia prison. Not only did she have her own room, but she could also get the books she wanted. Other than not being able to go out, there was nothing else. However, in the 10 years that she was locked up in Badia prison, Ophelia Blood's corrosion of the vampire's blood gradually deepened. She realized that if she didn't take action soon, she would very likely become the Devil King's blood thrall, and be controlled by the Devil King. Therefore, she took the opportunity when the heretic church attacked Badia prison, and escaped from the prison. All the clues were connected. Dake listened to Professor Shi-Erfu's detailed explanation, and finally had some sense of reality about Ophelia Blood's experience. At the same time, he also had an opportunity to ask about the Devil King. The Devil King is also a vampire? No. Professor Shi-Erfu decisively denied it. The Devil King isn't a vampire, but he has all the characteristics and abilities of a vampire. This came from his vampire vessel, which is Vlad. Dake couldn't help but ask, what exactly is Vlad? Professor Shi-Erfu explained, Vlad is one of the countless vessels created by the Devil King. Once the Devil King is killed, he will be reborn in one of the vessels. Therefore, even the hero can only seal him and not kill him directly. This is because no one knows how many vessels he has and where each one is. In fact, all the information about Vlad was told to me by Ophelia Blood. After listening carefully, Dake couldn't help but think, why does this sound more difficult than Voldemort? Professor Shi-Erfu couldn't see Dake's expression and said, let's not talk about the Devil King for now. Vlad's resurrection should be a coincidence. He should have been completely dead. Ophelia Blood told me that Vlad was one of the vampires who invaded the academy during the war. He once came into contact with her, but was later killed in a secret passage. However, the nature of his soul is very special. This might have something to do with him being a vessel, which is the prerequisite for his resurrection. I see. Dake nodded. I have a general understanding now. Then, what was the Blood Maiden's real purpose in sneaking into the academy? She couldn't have just come to see her son, could she? Professor Shi-Erfu said. Of course that was one of her purposes. The other purpose was to resurrect Vlad. Dake said in surprise, but didn't Vlad already? Professor She-Erfu sighed. That was an accident that no one could have predicted. Ophelia Blood's original purpose was to resurrect Vlad, and then order him to remove the vampire corruption in his body. After all, the Devil King's vampire abilities came from Vlad. She thought that Vlad must have a way. But later, Dake's expression was strange. But later, she found out that Vlad had been resurrected and then died? Professor She-Erfu shook his head. That's the problem. Vlad didn't completely die this time. Dake was surprised. What do you mean? His ashes were refined. How could he not die? Professor She-Erfu said. Ophelia Blood found Vlad's soul one step ahead of us. She cut off a part of it and used it as the foundation to make a phylactery. Dake found that tonight was really a night of surprise. A lich phylactery? Professor She-Erfu replied, something like that. In short, she has successfully regenerated Vlad's soul fragments, and plans to resurrect him again on Easter Day, which is today. I see. Dake suddenly exhaled. I finally understand. Professor She-Erfu was puzzled. What do you understand? Dake touched the Dream Demon magic card that he put away, but he didn't say that the Dream Demon was refined from Vlad's soul powder. He had more or less determined where the problem with the Dream Demon was. The Blood Maiden had obviously started the ritual. Vlad was probably already in the process of being resurrected. And this time, the resurrected Vlad's memories might very well be restored because of Easter. But the Vlad with memories was the Vlad that the Blood Maiden wanted to resurrect. As a dream demon that was refined from Vlad's soul powder, it would naturally be affected by the ritual. Although the part of Vlad's consciousness should be in the hands of the Blood Maiden, and the dream demon wouldn't become Vlad, it was very likely that it would share a part of his memories. Thinking further, could the dream demon have already become one of the Demon King's vessels? Dake quickly thought in his heart. When he answered, he said, the Blood Maiden wants to imitate the resurrection of the sage and let Vlad recover his memories while being resurrected. Indeed. Professor She-Erfu confirmed his judgment, but immediately said, but that's already in the past. I've already convinced her to give up this unrealistic idea. Dake was slightly puzzled. Why? Professor She-Erfu said, because even if Vlad recovers his memories, he won't have the ability to remove the Demon King's embrace. Ophelia was just blinded by a momentary gain and loss. In other words, it was a desperate attempt to find a doctor. Professor She-Erfu continued, vampires are a race that places great importance on rank. This is determined by their bloodline. High-ranking vampires have absolute bloodline suppression over low-ranking vampires. Compared to the Demon King, Vlad's sequence is obviously low. Relying on him to remove the Demon King's embrace is like relying on a lizard to deal with a dragon. It's extremely laughable. Dake actually didn't understand this. But since Professor She-Erfu had made such a decision, it was most likely true. He analyzed. In that case, if the Blood Maiden really did that, not only would she fail, but it's also very likely that she would be devoured by Vlad. Professor She-Erfu smiled. That's why I gave her another method that's more likely to be effective. 7,000 plus votes requested. Chapter 410. Another method? As Dake pondered, he became more and more curious. Simply reviving Vlad wouldn't solve the problem at all. Then, what should Professor She-Erfu do to help the Blood Mistresses remove the effects of the embrace? Set up a barrier, open a secret passage. And then what? The Dream Demon was affected, which meant that Vlad was still the core of their actions. But if the essence didn't change, how much could the whole thing change? As if guessing what he was thinking, Professor She-Erfu quickly said, this involves a question. What exactly is the embrace? Dake frowned slightly and replied, a disease? In fact, he had carefully looked up information related to vampires. The vampire's embrace mainly came from the vampire's bloodline. Remember this. https://m. VIP can't you? VIP. The closer the bloodline was to the ancestor, the stronger the effect of the embrace. Vampires with pure enough bloodline could secrete a special magic element from their fangs. This magic element was like a kind of bacteria. Once injected into the blood vessels of the prey, it could absorb the power of the blood and quickly proliferate, thereby infecting the prey's entire body. The so-called blood enslavement could actually be classified as a disease. It was very similar to sepsis. Therefore, after checking the information, Dark had always felt that the vampire's embrace was actually a kind of illness, and not a phenomenon such as magic or curse that was commonly mentioned. But Professor Shierfu obviously didn't think so. She said clearly, although I don't know why you think it's a disease, as far as I know, the embrace is actually a reproductive behavior. Reproductive behavior? Dake's tone was inevitably a little surprised. Professor Shierfu patiently explained. Creatures like vampires have very low fertility. Of course, this is a common problem for almost all long-lived species. But in the case of low fertility, long-lived species are like other creatures. They can get sick, and if they are killed, they will die. It is very difficult for them to live to the end of their lives. This causes the number of long-lived species to decrease year by year, and they are on the verge of extinction. In order to continue the race, vampires develop the embrace over a long period of time. Even if they don't reproduce normally, they can still reproduce. Dake pondered for a moment. That seems to be the case. Professor Shierfu continued. Only when you know the essence of the matter can you find the right remedy. The reason why Ophelia Brad hadn't become a blood thrall was because she was a member of the blood race and had an innate resistance to the corrosion of her bloodline. As a result, the embrace hadn't been completed. In a sense, she was still in the process of reproduction. But now, the process is about to be completed. Dake asked curiously, so we need to find a way to stop the reproductive behavior. If you can interrupt it. Professor Shierfu said. The problem is that the vampire's embrace is irreversible and cannot be interrupted. It will inevitably continue. Therefore, in this case we can only find a new way of thinking, such as replacing the object in this process. Replace it. Dake narrowed his eyes thoughtfully. He found that he seemed to have found the logic behind Professor Shierfu's words. Using a certain method to replace the object of reproduction conceptually. In this way, the reproduction behavior would still be carried out, but Ophelia Brad would be replaced from this behavior. That was probably the unique logic of this idealistic worldview. With Dake's own conceptual logic, he wouldn't have been able to figure it out without the guidance of Professor Shierfu's words. But now that he had the logic, how could he actually replace it? Through ritualistic magic. By borrowing the uniqueness of the secret passage? What role did the vampire Vlad play in it? Professor Shierfu answered all these questions one by one after that. After a long while, Dake finally understood. Professor Shierfu was trying to transfer the behavior of reproduction to the vampire Vlad. However, he wasn't trying to resurrect it, but refine it. He interpreted the concept of reproduction in the form of magic elves and replaced Ophelia Blood with it. As one of the Demon King's vessels, the vampire Vlad perfectly fits the concept of the Demon King's reproduction object. If everything goes well, not only will we be able to free Ophelia Bullard, but we'll also be able to get rid of Vlad's soul. It's killing two birds with one stone, Shierfu said slowly. Speaking of which, the reason I could think of this is because of your dream demon. Dake laughed dryly, knowing that the existence of the dream demon couldn't hide from Professor Shierfu's sharp eyes. However, refining one of the Demon King's vessels into a magic fairy was truly a genius idea. If he could collect all the Demon King's vessels, one day, maybe he could even summon the Demon King on the spot? Professor Shierfu's arrangement of the scene was even more profound and complicated than Dake had imagined. In the most basic magic refining, she used a special ritualistic refining method. The whole castle was used as the venue for the ritual, and the star barrier was used to adjust the celestial bodies so that the environment met the requirements of the refining. To be able to achieve this in such a short time was completely dependent on Professor Midya's extraordinary personal ability. After that, she relied on the uniqueness of the secret passage to replicate the historical scene to complete the entire ritual. The key actors were Bloody Maiden White Luoboat, Tom and Ryan Hex. Yes, even Professor Ryan Hex was part of their plan. White Gouda is the son of the hero, and he's playing the role of the hero of a certain generation. Luobot Broheim was once parasitized by the vampire Vlad, and he's playing the role of the hero's partner, a half-demon who was corrupted by the demons. Tom Nixon is a half-orc, and he's playing the role of a sorcerer. At first, they were enemies, then they became friends, and in the end they joined the hero's team. Ryan Hex is the hero of the spear, and he's playing the role of an old grandpa, a key character who appeared at the crucial moment and saved the hero many times. And Ophelia Bullard is playing the role of a pregnant demon king. This wasn't a fabrication, but a historical fact that really did exist. The demon king of that generation was a woman, and she was pregnant when she was attacked by the hero. In order to protect the child in her belly, the hero pierced her heart, but at the last moment, she used a secret technique to successfully give birth to the child. After she gave birth to the child, the hero was compassionate and didn't kill her on the spot. Instead, he took the child away and raised it as an adopted child. Until the hero died of illness, the Demon King's child didn't show any signs of rebellion. He lived in human society as a demi-human and lived an ordinary and stable life. It wasn't until the hero died of illness that he packed his luggage, left the human kingdom, and returned to the territory of the demons. Then, he took back the throne that should have belonged to him, and became the new Demon King. After that, the demons and humans entered a period of peace. But in the end, the peace was broken. The treaty signed by the two sides couldn't be implemented, and the war between the demons and humans broke out again. This was a very important part of the historical record. It perfectly proved that the conflict between the demons and humans was irreconcilable. Professor Shi Erfu intercepted this part of history, and according to the requirements of the ceremony, compiled it into a very feasible stage play. As for whether this stage play could achieve the desired effect, she wasn't 100% confident. Everything was an imitation of Professor Didi. Shi Erfu didn't have any experience. For her, this experiment was also an exploration of the secret passage. It was a hasty attempt, and the real executor of the ceremony was Ophelia Bullard herself. She and Midya only participated in the layout of the venue and the planning of the process. Apart from that, they were just the audience. During the whole process of the ceremony, because her and Midya's existence would have an unpredictable impact on the ceremony's environment, she could only hide in Midya's pumpkin carriage. Midya's pumpkin carriage could isolate and conceal one's aura. It was a very precious magic tool. In fact, she was able to bring Ophelia Bullard into the academy by relying on the special power of this carriage. But in this case, an intruder appeared. So my appearance changed the course of history? Dake had a strange look on his face. Professor Shi Erfu's arrangement naturally couldn't be just a stage play that imitated history. If he wanted this stage play to have the desired effect, he would need more arrangements that couldn't be seen on the surface. The amount of energy and material resources consumed was enormous. And if such a huge arrangement was ruined because of his intrusion, he would definitely feel bad. That's not the case. Fortunately, Professor Shi Erfu's answer dispelled his worries. Of course, there can't be only 5 actors in the brave crusade against the Demon King. As long as the main storyline doesn't change, the side quests can be adjusted. Even if there is a problem, Midya will be there. She will rely on the power of the barrier to repair the mistakes in the entire process from the outside. Midya's voice sounded. Tonight you can only come across it by chance. The right time, the right place, and the right people. The perfect time. The perfect location. The perfect personnel configuration. It was as if everything was set. It was as if everything was fate. But in fact, fate had long been broken. Everything had long been changed. After Dake understood the whole situation, he gradually relaxed. Whether the ceremony went smoothly or not had little to do with him. He only needed to know that after tonight, the dream demon would recover. That was enough. Then next, Dake pondered. Can I find a place to catch up on my sleep? We are at the top of the clock tower. Professor Shi Erfu's voice sounded softly. Unlike Professor Midya, Professor Shierfa didn't want Dake to participate in this matter from the beginning. As for the observation that Midya mentioned, she was not interested at all. That's too high. Dake yawned and said, I'll find a classroom nearby and lie down for a while. I hope it will be over when I wake up. So he found an empty classroom nearby and walked in with the magic elves. Tonight's ceremony involved the safety of Ophelia Bullard. If he insisted on interfering, it was hard to say what kind of variables it would cause. People might not necessarily have a realm, but they must have a bottom line. This melon, it was fine to not eat it. Moreover, he was already very full. He was so full that he was about to burst. White is the child of hero Brett and blood concubine Ophelia. According to Professor Shierfa's theory, when the blood concubine gave birth to White, she was still in the Demon King's reproduction. Because of the Demon King's embrace, the Demon King's blood flowed in her veins. If we infer correctly, the Demon King's blood probably also flows in White's body. No wonder he could understand, into the abyss! I'm afraid that's the most serious information revealed by this incident. A future hero with the Demon King's blood. Compared to this, the blood concubine is not important. If this information is exposed at this time, White's situation will become very difficult. Thank you, Professor Sylph, for telling me everything, Lin Sanjia said with a smile. I just don't know if they've arranged a mother and son reunion scene? I don't think so. After all, the blood concubine's role in this stage play is the Demon King that needs to be defeated by the hero. The Demon King and the hero's play is a topic that will never change. Dake lay in his seat with his hands behind his head, and quietly looked at the empty ceiling of the classroom. There was a spider web in the corner of the ceiling. A spider was working hard on the web, making it denser and thinner. Unknowingly, he closed his eyes and fell asleep for the third time that night. The little demon beast was lying on the table beside him, looking at the sky with its eyes open. The lion beast and the Dilu beast were leaning on the other side of the wall with their arms crossed and legs crossed. The Dream Demon's magic card was still flickering slightly, but the frequency was slow and the brightness was very low. The world was very strange. The Demon King's blood flowed in the hero's body. The Valkyrie's blood flowed in the Demon King's body. The descendants of the kingdom's dual swords were like this. How many hybrids in this world had the Demon King's blood flowing in them? How much of the so-called Demon King's extinction was true? Beep. In the dreamland filled with flowers, Dark abruptly woke up. He opened his eyes and reached for his card bag. Then, a branch school's door card that kept vibrating quickly entered his hand. Is it the door card's message? Not the branch school's card? Dake nodded his head. The breeze was still there, and the magic power was still fluctuating. Who sent me a message through the door card? Chapter 411. The key card developed by Professor Ka Zaire differed from the branch card in that it had the ability to communicate with each other. However, this communication function was essentially copied from the branch card, so it was exactly the same as the communication mechanism of the branch card. The holder of the key card only needed to inject magic power and specify a name to send the message, or specify a range to send messages to multiple people. The difference was that only the professor had the authority to send messages to the branch card, while all holders of the key card had the authority to send messages. After Dake discovered that someone was sending messages through the key card, he immediately thought about the identity of the other party. Now the only people who had the key card should be the creator, Professor Ka Zaire, and the other winner of the duel festival, Joseph Bruno. At most, there was Professor Shierfu. But if Professor Shierfu wanted to send a message, he only needed to use the wind spirit as a medium. Then it's Professor Ka Zaire or Joseph Bruno? With a trace of confusion, Dake clicked on the envelope icon on the key card. The first URL was https://m. Vipcanchu. VIP. However, the name displayed in the message was not anyone he had guessed, but Ophelia Bullard. Blood Maiden. While wondering why Blood Maiden had the key card in her hand, Dake looked at the content of the message. 191519, 191519. What does that mean? After reading the number displayed in the message, Dake couldn't help but hesitate. You're awake? There was a fluctuation of magic power above his head, and Professor Shirfu's voice was transmitted through blessing of the wind spirit. Dake nodded slightly and said, "Yes, I'm awake." "Professor, did the ceremony go smoothly? I've received a message from Ophelia Bullard." "The ceremony went very well, Midya has been." Professor Shirfu said. "Wait, Ophelia sent you a message? Using the key card?" "Yes, it is." Dake nodded. "How did she get it?" Professor Shirfu was silent for a moment and then said, "It should be from Joseph Bruno." "What did she say?" Dake was slightly enlightened. "A line of numbers, 191519. She seems to be quite free?" Dake said casually, but the atmosphere in the pumpkin carriage suddenly changed. Professor Shirfu abruptly turned to look at Midya Bartholomew. The latter opened her eyes almost immediately, and the silver moonlight in her eyes became even more intense. However, after the light disappeared, Midya shook her head and said, "Everything is going smoothly. Everything is going according to plan." Professor Shirfu. "But this message?" Professor Mitya said, 191519 might not necessarily be SOS. Dake asked curiously, "Why SOS?" Professor Mitya said, 19, 15, and 19 correspond to the 19th, 15th, and 19th letters of the alphabet, respectively. In other words, they are SO and S. This is a simplified spelling that has been given the meaning of a cry for help. Dake suddenly understood. "I see. The writing system of this world was very subtle. The main function of the 26 English letters was the phonetic transcription. It was equivalent to the pinyin of the modern Chinese system. Only in rare cases would it be mixed with real words. For example, complex English words would not be found here." Dake thought for a moment and said, "Should I send a message?" "No need," Professor Shirfu whispered. "Although it is a little troublesome because of the secret passage, I can still contact Olivia." After saying that, she immediately closed her eyes. Her pale blonde hair fluttered in the wind. With the help of the wind spirit, her voice penetrated the barrier of the secret passage, and she briefly communicated with Ophelia Bullard. After that, she opened her eyes and shook her head at Professor Mitya. Dake waited for a moment. When he heard no response from the other side, he asked with concern, "How is it?" Professor Shirfu's tone became heavier. "She said that she did not send you any message." Sigh. Professor Mitya sighed. "It seems that we are in trouble." It was 2:30 in the morning of April 2nd. Dake Dimming had not even started eating his melon when he was halfway through. He rolled down from his seat and waved at the Dilu beast and the lion beast. "We have work to do. Is it really okay?" Professor Shirfu's voice carried a hint of worry. Dark reached out his hand and twirled it around his ear, causing the wisp of breeze to wrap around his fingertip. "It's always a risk." Dake lowered his head slightly and whispered, "With the blessing of the wind spirit, there will be no problems." He quickened his pace and walked out of the classroom. At the top of the spiral clock tower, inside the pumpkin carriage, Professor Shirfu twirled the wind in his hand. His expression was unprecedentedly serious. "Mitya, can you guarantee that the prophecy is correct?" Professor Midya leaned her voluptuous body against the soft back of the chair and said with a hint of laziness, "If you insist on asking, in order to protect the dignity of the prophet, I can only tell you that it is 100% correct." Professor Shirfu's face sank. "I am not arguing with you." Professor Mitya yawned slightly and said, "But I remember that I told you a long time ago. The children will not be harmed. The hero's sword will pierce through the black fog." Then she suddenly said seriously, "Now that the black fog has appeared, fate has already thrown the dice. As the audience, we have always been the same." Professor Shirfu could not help but take a deep breath. "I understand what you mean, but I can't help but feel worried." Mitya glanced at her and said to herself, "Aertiai's heart is much harder than yours." Professor Shirfu sighed. "That's why she is the principal." The ceremony was already halfway through. The participation of outsiders in the middle of the ceremony would bring unpredictable changes to the entire ceremony. Not to mention these two professors. whether it was Sarah She Erfu or Mitya Bartholomew. As long as one of them walked out of the pumpkin carriage, it would instantly increase the upper limit of the ceremony. The entire ceremony would instantly jump from the level of a novice village to the level of the end. Under such circumstances, Dake Dimung, who was already involved at the beginning of the ceremony, could act normally without affecting the ceremony too much. However, he also had to play his role well. A strong opponent of the hero? Dake guessed the meaning of this character, and came to the most familiar entrance of the secret passage. In that historical fragment, the strong opponent of the hero was a human who embarked on the journey at the same time as the hero. They had the same goal as the hero and would engage in positive competition with the hero during the journey. In the end, they would often meet up with the hero and fight the Demon King together. In history, there was usually such a character in the hero and Demon King drama. To borrow a prophecy from Mitya Bartholomew, history is always similar, and reincarnation never stops. However, some strong opponents could grow at the same time as the hero, and some strong opponents would be left far behind by the hero. At the same time, there were also some formidable rivals that surpassed or even replaced the hero. Of course, when that time came, the hero would become a strong opponent, and the strong opponent would become a hero. In this world where hero and hero candidates were many, this kind of situation was common. In the previous era, the strong opponent of the hero Brett God was one of the two swords of the kingdom, the Valkyrie. It's here. Dake injected magic power into the entrance of the secret passage, and ripples appeared on the surface of the secret passage. According to Professor Shi Erfu, among all the entrances to the secret passage, only the seal here is temporarily opened. Little demon beast. Vanguard is here. The little demon beast flapped its wings and rushed into the secret passage. Half a second later, half of its head popped out and said, "It's safe." Dake then stepped in. What entered his eyes was the secret passage that he hadn't seen in a long time. The nearby torches were already lit, and the flickering light reflected on the smooth walls. He raised his hand and touched the blessing of the wind elves on his fingertip. The magic wave in it was very obvious that it was becoming calm. Just as Professor Shi Erfa said, the barrier of the secret passage would interfere with the transmission of magic power from the inside to the outside, and the transmission of information would be delayed. What should we do next? The lion beast stepped forward and took the initiative to walk to the front. Follow the guidance of fate. Dake took out the Dream Demon magic card from his sleeve and said pretentiously. The Dream Demon magic card responded, and the scarlet beam of light reappeared. Let's go. Let's go. Meow. After walking out of the first section of the secret passage, the atmosphere of the entire secret passage suddenly changed, and the sense of familiarity disappeared. Dake looked at the originally flat wall that had turned into a steep mountain wall. Although he was surprised, he wasn't too surprised. This time there were two leaders of the ceremony. As the actor, Ophelia Bullard was also the internal leader of the ceremony. The other leader was Mitya Bartholomew, who was mainly responsible for the external leadership and fine-tuning. Ophelia Bradley was the core. Once there was a problem with her, the whole ceremony would collapse. Dake had participated in the ceremony led by Professor Didi before, but that ceremony and this ceremony were completely different in nature. This was because there was a difference in the purpose and the object of the ceremony. In concept, the ceremony led by Professor Didi was actually more complicated and difficult. Compared to that, the ceremony led by Ophelia Bradley and Mitya Bartholomew was really at the level of a stage play. But a stage play was small and refined. Although it was small, it was more refined. A few minutes later, Dake saw a group of monsters coming from the fork and ordered the lion beast to attack. Beast King Fist. A lion-shaped energy wave erupted from the lion's roar, and in an instant, all the monsters were blasted into powder. It's just a facade. Dake shook his head and quickly moved forward. The monsters that were created in the secret passage because of the ceremony were far inferior to the Shung Malian underground monsters. They were like paper made in a hurry. When they stepped forward, the monsters' fragments had turned back into magic starlight, and were absorbed by the secret passage. They continued to move forward. Half an hour later, Dake was deep in the secret passage. Professor Sheerfa's message would be transmitted from the blessing of the Wind Elves every once in a while. Although it was vague, he could barely understand the meaning. The ceremony was still going smoothly. Everything was going according to plan. It was as if the line of numbers sent by Blood Maiden through the door card didn't exist. But in this smooth process, there was a hint of oppression that was gradually accumulating. Dake felt a sense of urgency. Another half an hour passed. He finally caught up with the hero's progress and came in front of a huge door. Looking up at the huge bronze door that was quite similar to the door of the two-headed demon's palace in the underground city, Dake took a deep breath. The huge door had been pushed open, and there was a gap that allowed 3 people to pass through side by side. It could be seen that the actors of the hero team were already deep inside. As the core actors of the whole ceremony, White and Luo Boat knew nothing about the ceremony itself. They were like marionettes, and the one who held part of the script was Tom Nixon, the actor of the magician. But even Tom Nixon only had a part of the script. He didn't know the final goal of the ceremony, and was only acting according to Ophelia Blood's instructions. The other actor of the old grandpa, Ryan Hux, was acting based on his own will. The hero of the spear, who was supposed to retire behind the scenes, returned to the stage after his old age. His identity wasn't hidden from the academy, but Principal Erdii judged that he wasn't a threat, so he was allowed to enter the academy. Professor Sheerfa didn't know at first, but now he knew everything, so he led him into the situation and let him play a role that he had always been playing. The highest level of acting is not knowing that you are acting. They are using their own will to exert their abilities. To them, everything is real. Dake passed through the gap behind the lion beast and entered the core of the ceremony. Hellcrown. His vision suddenly widened. There was no roof above him, but the night sky was filled with dark clouds. A ropeway paved with iron chains crossed the cliff, and after crossing it, there was a dry land of black soil. The Hellcrown's castle appeared at the end of his vision like the background. A bolt of lightning suddenly struck down, as if it was going to tear the whole world apart. Dake took out 2 magic cards from his card bag and rushed onto the ropeway. In the name of Dake Dimung, I summoned the Hawkman Wrestling. The Hawkman Wrestling appeared in the light with a sharp gaze and pounced on the vultures that flew out from the cliff. Countless arrows pierced through the vultures' bodies. The problem now is that the ceremony itself is part of the situation. You're tuning in to the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.